call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Neil Hart and I'm chairing today's panel. With me is Brent McIntyre to my immediate left, and to my far left is Ed Sawatsky. The assessor this afternoon is Svetlana Scheibel. And the recording secretary is Kelsey Harrison. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. So can you do the swearing in?
Yes. Would you like to swear in on the Bible or affirm without? Could you please state your name?
Svetlana Scheibel.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Could you please state your name? And do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay, the first item on today's agenda is 1625 Laji Modier Boulevard. So can you proceed by reading
File number 19-2496, address 1625 Legend Modier Boulevard, roll number 040007030400, owner Steinbach Credit Union. Wir valuing the property as it stands on January 1st, 2020. Based on economic condition of April 1st, 2018. His appeal is with respect to the amount of assessed value only. Based on evidence in this report, it's assessor opinion that the market value of the subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $10,472,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. Subject property is located southeast portion of the city of Winnipeg. You can open page 11, and you can see subject location map air photo, road dot. It's our property. This property has a land area of 1,814 square feet. It's regular shape. Improvements was built in 2010 with plan area and main floor area 14,544 square feet, basement area of 3,293 square feet, and leasable area 43,9 937 square feet. On page 2, you can see that he received a request for information, income expense information for 2017 information years and May 2nd, 2018. This response you can find on page 14 and 15. He was provided with annual expenses for maintenance improvements. Subject sale history. Subject was sold in 2005. It was land sale only for $700,000. Subject air photo presented on page 2. On page 3, you can see table and map of my rent comparables. First slide is subject. Subject property 1625 Lagimadier Boulevard. It's building built in 2005-2010. A land area. You can see land area in our assessed value, rent $21.73 for 14,400 square feet. It's bank area. All 5 comparables bank on Portrait, Regent, Pembina, Grand in Kivatin Street. Map below you can see location of my comparables with subject property red dots. Everything suburban banks built between 1982 to 2016, with land area between 1 million square feet to 50,000 square feet. Leasable area between 3,000 to around 7,000 square feet, with rent media came across $31 per square foot. On my page 4, I have comparables for ATM kiosk and the drive-through kiosk. Subject property ATM kiosk has 144 square feet, and we assess ATM net rent per square foot $144.81. I did presented my 3 comparables on Ness, Marion, and St. Mary Street. Bottom of under table all map, all my comparables. Media of ATM comparables $146.34, with our assessed $144.81. On page 5, I presented office rental rent comparables because our property has 2 different stream, bank and office stream income producing. Office space for subject property first line occupied around 29,000 square feet. We assess $14.08 per square foot. My 5 comparables located Taylor Avenue, Kivatin, Grant Avenue, Gateway, Portrait Avenue. Map, you can see map under table. Everything suburban office space, retail space. All building built between 1987 and 2016. Lease started from 2015 to 2018. Square footage between 1,700 square foot to 5,700 square feet, with media of net rent $23 per square foot. On page 6, bank was assessed. We can see two premises. First premise is for ATM kiosk, 142 square feet. Second premise, bank, 14,400 square feet. Assessed $21.73. Our total potential rent, 329,000 around. We did apply typical for this type of space, 2% vacancy loss. Our effective gross income, $322,856. Expenses, we apply not recoverable expenses, 2%. It's expense allowance. Those expenses include advertising, promotion, professional fees, structure, repairs, etc. Plus, we apply shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy, $80 per square foot. Net operating income for bank stream, 314,000. With capitalization rate 6.55%. On page 9, we have a capitalization rate support table. All office building. We divide na downtown AB, suburban AB, and we look specific city of Winnipeg, 20-80 percentages. It's between 6.2 and 7.3. So our 6.55% capitalization rate inside our range that very well supported by Colliers, CBRE, Cushman, Wakefield. So estimate value by dividing overall capitalization rate, net operating income divided by capitalization rate. Estimate value for bank income, 4,795,000. On page 7, we present our workup for office space finishing. It's two premises, main floor and basement, with average rate per square foot rent $14.08. Our potential rent for this stream, 413,750. Typical vacancy loss of 5.5% was applied. Effective gross income, $390,994. We did apply general 2% expenses allowances that include advertising, promotion, professional fee, structural repairs, etc. and shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $7 per square foot. Net operation income, 372,000. We apply same overall capitalization rate 6.55%, and our estimate value for office finished space, 5,677,000. On page 8, we provide summary above stream for bank and office space finishing. Our final estimate value, 10,472,000. All my comparables presented at the page 16 through 16 to 25. For example, our portage on page 16, I have two comparables. First line, $31 for office for bank space, and $23 per square foot for office space, office retail space. On page 17 on region, it's $25 per square foot for bank. On Pembina, page 18, you can see a photo and photo subject of comparable property on Pembina. Bank rent in 2017 for $32 per square foot. Grant Avenue, I presented two different lines. One first line for bond, signed lease in 2016 for $32, and second line for rent space in 2017 for $30. On Kivatin, rent signed 2016 for $24. On another on Kivatin, adjusted property for retail or office space, $19, signed lease in 2017. On page 22, Gateway, it's retail space for $25, signed in 2015. On page 23, it's presented my three comparables for ATM kiosk. On NES, rent $140 per square foot. On Marion, $146.44. On St. Mary, $150 per square foot. Based on evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018, $10,472,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed.
Is that your presentation? Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Ms. Schabel, I'll start with as you've identified, we've got two income streams that the department's put on it, one for bank and one for office areas, correct? Okay. So I'll start with the bank income stream that the department's applied. Could I ask Ms. Schabel if you and the board members could turn to the first, the page, I guess 2 it would be, not the cover page, but the next page in is the property photo. So, Ms. Schabel, the construction of the property, and I'll go to your other, you've got another photo in there, but when we look at the aerial photograph, there's sort of the round recessed area in the middle of the property. That round recessed area exists, the only improvements in that particular area is the main floor improvements. There's no second story to that segment, correct? If you're not sure, just say that's fine, I can tell you there
That's
is no
fine,
second.
you know.
Okay. Okay, so if we then go to page 13, please. Now the top photo, it's a little dark, but when you look, this is the view from the street. So that round area, you can kind of see there's a sort of an angled protrusion where the roof line is just of that round area. That round area is in fact the retail banking area itself, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And again, looking at page 12, the bottom photo, that actually shows it very well. It's that round area there where you walk in and you do your retail banking, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you aware that that retail banking area comprises roughly only 40% of the main floor space, with the remainder being office?
If you say so.
And I appreciate your forthright answer, Ms. Schabel. I'll go more into it when I present my evidence, so thank you for that answer. If we then could turn briefly to page 6, please. So what the department's done, though, to be clear, what the department's done is they've taken the entire main floor area, which includes both the round area, which is the retail area, and the main floor office space, and that's the total area of 14,400 feet, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
Oh, okay. And then to that area, they've applied sort of a blended rent of $21.73.
Mm-hmm.
And in the ATM, that drive-through ATM is the top revenue item of 16,533.
Yes, it's correct.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, the ATM will have no bearing on this. We're actually a little bit higher, so that's a non-issue as far as the ATM income stream goes. Okay, so then with that in mind, with those questions in mind, pardon me, can we turn briefly, very briefly to page 3? These are the department's bank rent comparables that we brought in this afternoon. So, comp number 1, that's Westwood Village Shopping Center, correct, at 3260 Portage? If you're not sure, that's fine, just say you're not sure, I've researched this. So I'm suggesting to you it's the Westwood Village Shopping Center.
Right.
And it's the
And
TD,
shopping center.
and it's the TD Bank at that shopping center, correct?
Mhm, correct.
Now, 1565 region, were you aware that when you've got the column, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th column in is AYB. Does that stand for actual year billed, or is that an acronym somehow for effective year billed?
It's actual year's bill.
Okay, thank you for that. Were you aware that the effective age that the department's applied to 1565 region is 1995?
I didn't put this information.
Okay.
For me, very important actual bill.
Okay, I'll present that information in due course, but if, assuming that my statement's correct, that would indicate certainly there've been, significant upkeep and maintenance and renovations done to that bank building, correct? Okay. 1200 Grant, which is your comparable number 4 here, again, that's Grant Park Shopping Center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so this is the brand new Cambrian, if I understand correctly, this is the brand new Cambrian on that Grant Park Shopping
Yeah,
Center
it's
site?
built 2016.
2016, yeah, and I think they moved in early 2017. Okay, so with respect to, pardon me, those, I won't have more questions on that, Mr. Chairman, I'll get into it in my evidence, because the total areas mesh very well. The difference between retail banking and office don't, so but for my purposes, my questions on this line of questioning from Ms. Shable, I think I'm satisfied. But if we turn to page 6, then, Ms. Shable, and this question would apply to both the income stream on both pages 6 and 7, the OFS and the bank income streams. In prior assessments, the department had applied an additional unrecovered expense allowance of 5%, correct?
It's passed.
Pardon me?
Right now, we applied 2%.
I understand, that wasn't the question. In previous cycles, the department had applied an additional allowance of 5% in addition to the 2%, correct?
We have new cycle and new parameters.
Pardon me?
We have new cycle and new parameters.
I understand. But that's
It's
not,
not.
that's not the question. You haven't answered the question. So I put it to you, Ms. Shable, that indeed the department did apply an additional unrecovered expense allowance of 5%. With respect to then the capitalization rate of 6.55%, that was model-driven cap rate, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay. Okay, so that on the banking side of things, I think relates to the questions I wanted to ask. Then if we move to initially page 7. So this is the department's valuation for the office component of the subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the area though, and this kind of ties into the question is how the department divvied up the bank space, because the bank income stream comprises, if you recall and if you agree, the entire main floor, 14,400 feet, right?
Okay, listen.
14,400 feet, okay, so the 20, and my point is this, and my question is this, to confirm, the 26,100 square feet that's shown in the office valuation, that's made up entirely of areas above the first floor, second and third floor offices, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no main floor space included in that? Okay, I'll take that as an agreement. And the 3,293 square feet, that's basement area, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that's mechanical and storage area, were you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. So then if we turn from that office valuation, if we can turn briefly to page 5, please. So recalling that the area of 26,100 is all second and upper floor office, none of the comparables that you've listed here are anything but main floor offices, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, Ms. Shable, only comparable number one, which is Taylor Avenue, that's actually the only office building on the comparables list for office space, correct?
Yes.
So if I'm understanding right, I think indices number 2 and 4 are neighborhood shopping centers.
Yes.
And-
Also, I find my bank comparables in same shopping centers.
Oh, I understand. No, and certainly with the banks, they would be in those retail locations, but I guess I have a concern with respect to,
So if you can see
comp-
difference between office space rent and a bank space rent.
okay, but here's the problem, Ms. Shable. Comparable number 2, which is a regional, or a neighborhood shopping center, that's a Subway, correct?
Yeah.
So that's got nothing to do with an office comparable. That's a main floor retail restaurant
Please
lease,
look on
correct?
my third page, comparables number 5, adjusted property and Kivat, and it's my bank. So I just
Okay.
look
No
few
dispute there.
meter ahead.
No dispute there. I'm suggesting that the 1,200 square foot Subway restaurant lease at 1020 Keewatin has absolutely no relevance to 26,000 square feet of office space on Lajimodi upper floor. It's not comparable, is it? I guess that's my question.
It's office space, it's only 1,200.
No, it's actually not office, Ms. Shable. Are you disagreeing with me that it's a Subway restaurant?
It's Subway, yeah?
Okay, then we'll just leave it at that. It's a Subway restaurant. 1,200 Grant Avenue, that is Grant Park Shopping Center, correct?
Correct.
That's a regional mall? Okay. 1105 Gateway Road, that again is, that's a 1,696 square foot CRU in the retail component of, on which there's a credit union as well, correct? If you recall, when we inspected the property, there's a retail strip behind the Integra that's
I
on that
see
site.
in my office rent comparables age of 1,200 Grant Avenue, it will be 1997. Just move that. It's state separate building. Retail space.
Now you've lost me, Ms. Shable. What are you
Okay,
referring
my
to?
comparables number 3, office retail rent comparables
Yeah.
on 1,200 Grant.
Yeah.
Effective years built of this building, like my comparables,
The actual year built?
1997, actual.
Okay, I'm sure Grant Park Shopping Center's been there for a while, so I
It's a
believe you.
state separate building.
Okay. So what tenant, is this a restaurant tenant?
No, it's Fiona Association.
I'm sorry?
Fiona Association.
I missed that.
It's retail space.
Okay, okay. So, yeah, and that's what I would expect at Grant Park Shopping Center. So, 1105 Gateway, though, going back to that question, Ms. Shable, we can agree that that's in the retail strip behind the Integra Credit Union on the site,
Yeah,
correct?
behind
Okay.
bank.
And the last comparable, 3260 Portage, again, that's the Westwood Village Shopping Center, and that's a Pet Value, correct? Okay, so another retail tenancy would be listed there. So of the 5 comparables, the only comparable that's an office is the 1530 Taylor?
Yes.
And that's roughly compared to the, I'm not using your 29,393 because that includes basement space, so I'm going to rather defer to the 26,100 feet, which is just the office, just the upper floor office. But using that 26,100 then, the 1530 Taylor office lease is only about 20% of the size of the subject office area, correct? Upper
Yes.
floor office
And
area.
I would like to mention my media for office rent comparables, $23 per square foot. And we apply half of that, $14.08.
Indeed, but 4 of your 5 comparables, Ms. Shable, are retail. Are retail and not comparable at
Yeah,
all.
all
so-
my bank comparables retail too.
Yeah, I'll discuss that when I make my presentation. Okay. Again, pardon me, with respect to the capitalization rate, that's a model driven rate of 6.55%, correct?
Yes.
Now, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, the materials don't, it's difficult to see from your materials, but I want to be fair to you, and ask you if you're aware of it, and not to spring this on you, but so if we turn again to page 2 of your materials. So you set out the main role, the credit union building in the parking lot, and then there's now these orange lines, that's the assessment parcel lot lines, or assessment parcel lines, correct? Are you familiar with the parcel to the north of the subject? That's that green, sort of green field and like just on page 2 to the immediate north?
No.
Okay, then I won't belabor the point, Mr. Chairman, I'll present that more in my materials. Though for the moment, based on the way that this hearing unfolds relating to some of the unrecovered allowance issues, those are my questions.
Okay, questions? Ed?
Well, I'm looking at the comparables, office and rent space, and the comparables that you've listed, there's nothing in the vicinity of the square footage that this building is in.
Yeah.
29 versus 5,000, 1,200, 4,000.
Yeah, it's done.
Was there no opportunity to find a comparable that was closer in square footage to this?
Because it's several floors. I just look specific for market, for office space, close to the bank.
Okay. But you couldn't find any office and retail rental bank-wise that would approximate the size of this building?
No.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Brent?
I just have one question. If you turn to page 3, the map is showing subject property to be in the Southdale area,
It's red dot, yeah.
yet it's bearing a North Kildonan roll number, 04.
It's a Penguins neighborhood.
Which is 04.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would suggest that if you can confirm that it's north of where you've positioned it on the map.
Oh, southeast, yeah.
Because I think if you turn to
The-
page
Because how I position it's by Portridge and our river. So I divide property on 4 portions. So it's southeast portion of city of Winnipeg.
what page are you
My
on?
location on page 3.
Mr. Chairman.
You talk
if-
about
if it helps, I
location,
can
yeah?
help. I didn't pick up on this, that Mr. McIntyre's exactly, I can help
You
to
can-
show exactly where the location is on
Yeah,
this
it
map.
it is north of Regent.
So if you take Ms. Shable's 1565 Regent on, and the 59 highway there, and you go just like maybe 2 dots north, that's where we are. You're exactly
On-
right, and I didn't pick up on that at all, actually.
On page 11, it's a good map of location, my subject property.
No, I don't think so. That's still not correct, Ms. Shable.
The top one's not correct, but if you look at
Yeah, the
the
top
bottom
one.
one,
Yeah.
it's
Yes, yeah.
Almy Avenue, which
So
is
it's-
right opposite Lowe's.
Exactly, it's just right opposite Lowe's, right by the Revenue Canada
Yeah.
building there, it's right in that area, so.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Okay, the cap rate is a blended cap rate, so you're not differentiating between the office and the bank, different cap rates.
Mm.
All
We
right.
just divide downtown, suburban, divide A, B, that's it. Same als Colliers, Berry, Cashman.
Okay, and I was going to ask you, and I think Mr. Reimer touched on it, about what use the basement is, what the basement is used for. If you have any
It's
information on that.
it's mechanical room and file storage.
Okay. All right. Has it been practiced to charge rent for mechanical space? I always thought that was kind of taken
For
out of it.
basement, yes.
Yeah. So that's the total square area, or is it the square area?
Because if you don't have basement, this mechanical room will be take space from main floor.
Okay.
So it's existing basement, it's going to occupy main floor.
All right. Okay, those are my questions, then you can present, Mr.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. To be clear, I made, as you can tell by my line of questioning on the department's selection of comparable rents for the office now. We turn briefly to page 5, comps numbers 2 through 5, I'm suggesting of no relevance. They range from a Subway to a Pet Value to a couple in a regional mall. The only comparable, and the reason I say this is actually the department's evidence, for truly comparable information, the department's evidence and our evidence is remarkably consistent, and my approach, I'm going to suggest, is consistent with the relevant comparable information for both. We're left with 1530 Taylor, which is 1685 a square foot, and to Mr. Sawatsky's question, which was my question as well, it's fully only 20% of the size of the subject upper floor rents. None of this is main floor rents, upper floor rents. So I'm suggesting to keep specifically 1530 Taylor in mind. I think that's fair, but very, very small. It's also main floor. So when you're talking upper floor rents in a much larger size, economies of scale and location would apply. So with that in mind then, moving to page 2 of our materials briefly. So as I mentioned, it's a very unique, I've had the chance to go through the property. It's a very interesting building. That round area, of course, and if the panel members are familiar with this building, that round area represents the retail area, and the office building was built around it. Very unique design, not particularly functional, but certainly for their specific build to, they build it for themselves to occupy, and it's working for them. But unique, but not necessarily functional. So on at the top of page 3, and in fairness, I didn't pursue the question of Ms. Shable because I suspected she wasn't familiar with the lot to the north. But that lot to the north is going to be a deduction from our income stream. If you look at that photo, that aerial photograph, you can see the dark area where there's water there, and that's actually serving the subject as there's pipes that go from the subject and drain off into that sort of little retention area there. So that parcel serves the subject and is not capable of development at this time. We're suggesting it should be deducted from the subject. It's not a huge deduction, but it will be a deduction that I will make in our valuation. So turning to page 4, and I had alluded to this earlier, that overall our total areas for the property are very, very similar, but the breakdown that we're suggesting is significantly different. I believe the departments, I'm not sure which, 43,936, yeah, so the department's got 43,937 total leasable, including the basement area. We have 43,793, so we're a couple hundred feet out, but it's not a material difference. The basement area is in fact mechanical and solid storage. That area is 3,293 square feet. The main floor area, and again I stress this, that's both the retail but also the office area. That office building is built around it, and this includes the office area on the main floor. It's 14,400 feet, and then the upper offices, which is floors 2, 3, and 4, are 26,100 square feet. So the total area is 43,793 square feet. As I mentioned, the retention pond is used by the subject, and we're going to be deducting the value of that lot to the north. So if we move,
I just asked a question, because
Yeah.
you said 43,793.
yes.
Yeah, on page 7, we've got 43,937.
Picking up on all the details that I missed. Let me see what I have in my evaluation. I'm going to go with 43,937.
Okay.
Indeed, good call. Yeah. I have used the department's overall numbers. The mix is different, but I have used their overall numbers. Exactly right, so thank you for that, Mr. McIntyre. Now, if we could turn please to, there's a number of issues here, but the single biggest issue is the market, the market rent issue. So if we turn to page 6, please. We've got 3 different segments here. I'll go through very quickly at first the finished basement rent. We've got, at the bottom of that chart, finished basement rents, they range from $3 to $7. Our basement is not finished basement. It's, as Ms. Shable mentioned, it is in fact file storage and mechanical. So I can tell the board now, it's not a huge difference, but we applied a rate of $3 being at the very low end of that scale. So that's all I'll say about that. Now, though, with respect to the retail bank rents, and I had suggested earlier that there's a high degree of consistency when one cuts through some of this information. So if I could ask Ms. Shable and the board members, if you could just open Ms. Shable's brief on page 3, just have that open while I'm looking at these rents at the top of my page 6. So, Ms. Shable's rent range, based on what she submitted, is between $24 and $31 a foot, with an average rent of $28.80 and a median of $31. That's actually not all that far off from ours. Ours is a little bit lower. We've got, as you can see at the top of our page 6, the chart there, we've got, these are all just straight banks, and they range from a low of $23 a foot up to a high of $31 a foot. Now, it's important, I'd asked earlier about the department's column AYB, which is actual year built. My ages are effective ages, because I believe that's an appropriate representation, where of course there's been a high degree of maintenance, renovations and such. I do believe the effective age is a fair and appropriate measure, and that's what I've presented in our chart. So you can see the effective ages there. They range, there's a couple that are older, 1989 for Keewatin, but then going all the way up to 2013, 2014 for Sterling Line Parkway. So there's a wide range of ages, but the bulk of them are certainly in the 90s and 2000 era improvements. And with that range in mind, what we're suggesting, I'm not asking you to turn in there yet, but we are actually using for the retail banking area proper, which is a lower area than the main floor area, we are in fact using a rent of $30 a foot. That $30 would represent the appropriate unit of measure when one looks at Ms. Shable's comps on page 3 with a mean of $28.80 and a median of $31. But it's applied to a much smaller area. It's applied to that round area, which is actually the retail banking area. So there's a high degree of consistency there, and we believe we're being very fair in our approach. There's also high degrees of consistency between the rental range that we've submitted and that the department submitted concerning true banking rents. Then the suburban office rents, and Mr. Swatsky had asked earlier about the larger office areas, and I had posed 2 queries, if the board would recall, both as to the area of the premises that was submitted by the department, but also the fact that 4 out of the 5 were, in my opinion, simply not comparable at all, retail premises. My suburban office rents from indices 17 through 36 are all office rents, as you can see in the column where it says floor. Some of them are main floor, some are upper floor, and I make that distinction because typically the upper floor areas are going to rent for a very noticeably lower rent than main floor space. So if you recall my question of the department's comparables, there was no upper floor rents. In addition to the 4 of the 5 being retail, they're all main floor rates. I've got a blend of main floor, upper floor, and in the case of indices 33 and 36, they're multi-floor, so that indicates that a tenant is located on more than one floor. Those suburban office rents range between a low of $13 and a high of $19.50, and the most comparable in size is the 10,000, index number 28, 10,027 square feet at $14.12 under the January 16 lease. You've got some some other leases, as indicated there. A lot of the areas are smaller, but we did want to pick leases that were negotiated nearest the reference date. So they range in size from a low of around $13.50 up to the high of $10,027. The closest in sizes being indices 23, 25, and 28 as I've shown there. So based on our review of those truly comparable rental office rents that we've produced, we're suggesting the following breakdown. So if you turn now to page 7, if you recall from the photos, so that round area, that sort of, I guess you call it the middle round area, that's the retail banking area. That's the area of 1,500 square feet that's shown in the middle of page 7 on my chart. So that is the retail bank proper, and that's the area upon which we're applying the $30 market rent. That $30 being consistent both with our comparables, and I'd suggest the assessor's bank rent comparables for that retail area. But then you've got the office building that's built around this for 4 floors, including the main floor. That's the remaining 8,600 feet, and that is all main floor, again, to be clear. So that would command of the office rents, that would command something on the higher end because it is just main floor space. So we have applied to that main floor office space a rent of $18 a square foot, recalling that based on the suburban office rent chart would be towards the upper end of that, those rental indicators. So, excuse me, given that information, then we come to the upper floor areas, floors 2, 3, and 4. That's a total area of 26,100 square feet. And based, again, on the office rentals indicators that we were able to find, and given the size of the 26,100 square feet over the 3 floors, we believe that $14.75 a square foot is very fair, certainly well within the range, and given the size and the fact that it's spread over 3 floors, very consistent with the market indicators, and as well consistent, I'd suggest, with a very large area as compared to the one office comparable that the department submitted on Taylor Avenue, which was much smaller on main floor. So we do believe it hangs together all very, very well. So at the bottom of page 7 then, there's our breakdown of the various floors. The main floor composed of the areas as shown on the chart in the middle of page 7, 5,800 bank retail, 8,600 office area, and the total potential rent we arrive at a $744,990, which is very consistent with the assessor's rental rates. So the vacancy, with the predominant use of the subject, almost 90%, call it 85%, as an office building, and that predominant use, we're suggesting a 5.5% vacancy rate for the subject, and we'll apply that rate to our income stream shortfall rate. We've actually applied a rate of 7, pardon me. I can't get rid of this stuff, so I apologize to the extent that I am coughing in the board's ear and the Shable's ear today. I didn't do it on purpose. The department's applied $8 on the bank space and $7 on the shortfall rate on the office. We just applied $7 across the board. We're treating it as a suburban office building, so we just applied the one rate. I had asked Ms. Shable earlier about the 5% additional allowance for unrecovered management. That's going to form a separate discussion based on a separate document that I have or I will be filing, and I have filed, so I'll get into that very shortly. Then, though, for the purpose of tying up this component of the discussion, the cap rate. So in our, and I'll go through this once, the cap rate will come up in a number of these hearings, so perhaps I'll go through it in a little more detail once, and then we can consider that presentation to be had, and I'd ask it to be carried forward to the remaining properties as far as the theory and some of the data that's in it. The cap rate, of course, represents the rate of return that a real estate investor will require. It's influenced, and I'm at the bottom of page 8 now, influenced by 3 major items: the perceived risk associated with the investment's income capacity, investor expectations for appreciation, and the required returns on other investment vehicles like stocks, bonds, etc. So direct capitalization, of course, is a method of converting a property's income into a value indicator. And of course, as we all know, the value definition, or the value methodology there is NOI divided by the cap rate. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, I mean, there's a lot of theory on page 9. I won't spend a lot of time on that. That's certainly there for the board's reference. If you wish to read it, there's the one quote: direct capitalization is a method used in the income approach to convert a single year's income expectancy into a value indication. That's what we're doing here today. Now, though, when one turns to page 10, so one of the key indicators, in a general sense, we're suggesting in the context of the present reference date of April 1/18 is the cost of money. And within that component, when one looks at the chart, the Bank of Canada chart at the top of page 10, you can see that between April 1/16, which was the reference date for the previous assessments, and April 1/18, the rate has gone up by 75 basis points from 0.5% to 1.25%. So a pronounced increase in that rate. And 5-year mortgage rates, this is the chart now at the middle of page 10, the 5-year mortgage rates had predictably followed that trend, going from 2.39% in April of 16 to 2.99% in April of 18. So an increase there of 60 basis points. So based on that element, which is certainly a significant element when investors are valuing the properties, we're suggesting that would lend itself to the conclusion that cap rates are, if anything, certainly not compressing, but there's also, of course, with the increased cost of money, the chance that cap rates might also be on the verge of increasing. Turning to page 11, the brokerage firms in Winnipeg presenting their summary studies of the office market in this case. As you can see in the chart again on page 11, I won't go through it all in detail, but certainly that reinforces the perspective, the perspective we have that there has been no compression between the April 16 reference date and the April 18 reference date. At the middle of page 11, of course, there is a notable shift in terms of the office market relating to Trafalgar Square, but that would certainly apply more particularly to the downtown region rather than to the suburbs that we're talking about here this afternoon. So again, I won't go. I'll leave for the sake of brevity. We've got a few to go through this afternoon. I'll leave the commentary on pages 11 and 12. We're suggesting that the rationale for the capitalized compression just isn't there from the city's point of view. But then we went on page 13, we've got some capitalization rates for office properties that we're presenting. They range from a low of 6.49% up to a high of, 8.94%. And certainly we believe that also lends itself to a conclusion that cap rates in this particular case, and the ones we'll see this afternoon, should not have been compressing at all between April 1 of 16 and April 1 of 18. Turn to page 14, there's again quite a bit of data there, but for our purposes this afternoon, what we're talking about is essentially suburban office properties or banks, but obviously, as in this case, with a very, very significant office component, the predominant use being office. And the last bullet point, what we're suggesting is that suburban office cap rates based on all this information should be between 6.25% and 7.50%, dependent on how well positioned the asset is as far as location, quality, and all of these factors that an investor would take into account. So, with respect to then our conclusion on the subject, I want to turn to page 15. So the department's applied a cap rate, the model-driven cap rate here of 6.55% for the 2020 assessment. But we're suggesting in this case the overall risk would be elevated due to the configuration of the asset as improved, and I mentioned that it's not really functional. I've labeled this as super adequacy. Certainly, if an office user were to use it, they wouldn't quite know what to do with that very significant round retail area. And certainly in that context with this unique asset, we believe for those reasons and looking at all the factors I've talked about relative to the economic environment in which we're operating, the 6.75% would be appropriate and consistent with the data that we presented on some of the sales of the office properties. I mentioned earlier the deduction of the associated lot. That is a deduction of $117,000 in the case of this assessment, and we will be removing it, as I mentioned, as a retention pond there on that lot that serves the subject, and we don't consider that land to be developable at this time. It was just there to service the subject property, so we have taken that value off. Page 16, there's the sort of closer in shot of that adjacent lot to the north and the subject property for the board's reference. So then, finally, going through page 17, and this presumes the application of the 5% non-recoverable allowance that I'll discuss in a few minutes. But there, as far as the income valuation, we've got the basement area, which you recall is the storage and file storage and mechanical. We applied the low rate of $3. The main area, 14,400 feet, is a rent of $328,896 based on the $30 rate for the retail area, and I believe it was $18 for the remainder. Just be sure on my numbers there. Yes, indeed, $30 for the retail banking area, $18 for the office main area. Then the upper office at $14.75. The kiosk, we've applied actually another rent slightly higher than the department at $21,240. We've applied to 5.5% to all income streams. We're viewing this as a suburban office, and have applied interesting. I applied a $8 shortfall rate there. I had suggested earlier that I applied 7, and I have plugged in 8. So. Again, that wouldn't be material. It really, if the board is so inclined, I can change that to 7 because it had been my intent and it would be my suggestion that the $7 rate should apply across the entire property. Then capping it at 6.75%, we come in at a capital value of $9,413,000, deducting that adjacent lot, which serves the subject, brings us down then to a final value of $9,296,000. And that is our request this afternoon. If I could ask the board members and Ms. Shable then to turn to page 20. So that round area I've been talking about, that's the retail area. You can see those on the photos on page 20. Page 21, it's the interior shot of those, of the retail area. And then in pages 22 through 24, that's the upper floor offices, including the lunchroom and the training room. 25 is the file storage and mechanical that we talked about in the basement. And then pages, I should mention this briefly, page 28. This just confirms that the assessed value of that parcel to the north is in fact $117,000, so I put that in so the board has comfort that the value I'm suggesting is appropriate. Page 30 is the department's valuation, and then at pages 34 through, 44, are photos of all of the comparables, not the basement ones, but all of the bank comparables and all of the office comparables that we presented in our chart. I won't go through those, I'll leave the board to go through those at their leisure. And with that, I am going to ask that the board and Ms. Shea will turn to the non-recoverable expense study. I apologize in advance to Mr. McIntyre because this is going to sound like a rerun. But I know that Mr. Harden, I have not presented this to you, and Mr. Swatsky, I have not presented this to you. So I'm going to...
Well, I wonder if we could, and Mr. Chairman, this is your call, if we can conclude the presentation on the first property and then just hear this one separately.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely.
Right, rather than go back to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds to be a good idea, because
Okay.
this will apply to all, I presume,
Precisely,
on
yeah,
all the
exactly
properties
right.
on the
Yes,
agenda.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Okay. So is there anything more you wanted to add?
As far as, aside from that issue, then that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any questions of?
Can I present my rebuttal?
Sure. Is that relevant
For
to
this property,
the property or to
Mhm.
the 5%?
property,
The property, yes, you can. do that,
comparable.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
For this agent brief, page 6. Comparables list.
I'm sorry. Page 6, comparable, which one?
Yes, your comparables.
Right?
Yeah, index to places, or it's gonna be 4100 say highway. List start date is shown at June 23rd, 2014 for $1,062 at $30 per square foot. The correct start date is October 1st, 2014 because first it's and 3,069 square foot, $36 per square foot. It's for bank. So it shows that index 2, $36 per square foot. Index 5, lease start date, Origin Avenue. Lease start date showed 2014, the correct start date is 1999.
Ms. Shable, you lost me, sorry, I was just still looking at the first one there.
Yeah, index 2.
Index 5, okay, no,
Mhm.
index 2, I'm good there.
Index 5. Lease start date in showed us 2014, the correct start date 1999. Index 7, Pembina Highway. Lease start date is shown on 2016, the correct start date 2006. Index 16, St. James. List start dates and show 2014, the correct start date 2004. Index 24 Henderson Highway is gross lease. The start date correction above are shown on attachment income expense questionnaire. You can see, it's interesting. And what I noticed that after dividing square footage for office space, bank, net potential net income for agents 745,000, it's much higher than our estimate value. So it shows that rent comparables that we did a great job. Your rent comparable for suburban office space with media $14.75. It's very well supported our office space rent comparables, isn't it?
I have no questions on that.
No questions on that, okay. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, Brent, Ms. McIntyre, any
I
questions?
have no questions.
Mr. Swetsky?
Just a short one about the, you've indicated that the property to the north is used for drainage,
Yes,
and you want it removed from the total.
income-based value of the subject, yeah.
Yeah, it's good questions, because it's completely different property, different estimation, how it should be affected. Value.
With respect, I'd suggest it's the same thing as when you've got a parking lot that serves the main holding, and it's a routine deduction from the income-based value of the main holding, where there's a separately assessed parcel that serves that property. This is very similar in nature with the retention pond, and it's, as you can see on the overhead, we're suggesting there's no independent, it's not capable of independent development other than to serve this subject.
Would you agree that this time it's not capable of being developed?
That's my premise. That's exactly my premise.
And who is
No.
owner of this property?
Excuse me, may I
I'm sorry.
ask questions? Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Swetsky's trying to ask questions.
Now, is this a usual situation in this region to use your own land for drainage? Or is this something
Actually,
that's...
no, I have not seen this very often, in fact. I don't.
Do you know if there is a drainage system by the city that the applicant could have tapped into for drainage?
I don't know. The fact that they have this there tells me that that's the conditions under which they were allowed to develop the subject, but I don't, strictly speaking, I didn't ask them if there was somewhere else that they could have tapped into.
Are you aware of any other properties in this region that has the same sort of setup?
No, I'm not, just aware of the subject.
The Mint, for example.
Good question. I don't know what their situation is there.
Is that just aesthetic, or is that
I
part of
don't
the
know.
drainage?
I don't know. I expect it to have a practical use in addition to aesthetics, but I don't know.
Thank you, no further questions.
Actually, I do have some questions. I thought we were talking about the rebuttal evidence
Oh, okay. Of the applicant.
of the applicant. So getting back to this retention pond.
Yes.
It's on a separate roll number,
It is indeed.
and was it appealed?
No,
Was it appealed?
no, on the premise that I'm suggesting today it would be deducted.
How best to word this? What's the zoning of that parcel?
I don't know. Very good question. If we turn to page 28, and that shows there is, assessed land area is 32,501 with C2 zone.
So it is zoned for C2 development?
Indeed, yeah, yeah. The reason I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, and I say this is both to Mr. McIntyre's question and Mr. Swatsky, if one looks at the aerial map on page 3, that retention pond occupies a very, very significant chunk of that property, and there's the lines, of course, run underneath the land to that pond, so the practicalities of citing any kind of improvement on there are very, very nominal. That's the basis upon which I'm suggesting it's not capable of independent development.
But given its zoning, could they not expand their parking lot?
Yes, indeed they could. That they could do, because you don't have to dig and mess with the pipes. Yeah, that's exactly right. But see, I guess, Mr. McIntyre, that's my very point. If they were to do that, then the first thing they should do after that is to, get the thing merged, or it would all be considered part. If there was a parking lot on part of that, it would be even more clearly just sort of one economic entity. Now there is an assessment line between them, and that's why the debates, I guess not debate, the discussions come up. I'm suggesting that's a distinction without a difference.
Okay. If you turn to page 17, and you apply the square footage, the leasable area of 43,937 by the blended market rent, I think if you want to rework that number,
Have I misled you? I still get 1696 a square foot.
no, but if you take 43,937,
Yeah.
43,937 times 16.96, I get 745,171.
Oh, okay. Yes, indeed, that's a rounding.
I mean, it's,
It's a rounding, you're right. It would be 16.95, or, yeah, it would be 16.952 or 956 or something like that, rounded to 1696. The 744,990 is represented by the sum. It's an auto sum function of those four lines, 9879, 328, 896, 384, 975, and 21,240. The 1696 is a rounding, sort of coming up with the average for the entire income stream, and it just rounds to 2 decimals.
okay, no further questions.
Okay, now this is kind of a standalone bank. Is there a difference in the rental rates you could get, say, a standalone versus being in a shopping center?
So if you are if you're a bank at Garden City, at Grand Park Shopping Center, that's a premium location. If you're a bank in a multi-tenant situation in Sage Creek or Bridgewater, that's a premium location. If you're a bank at 1020 Keewatin, that is not a premium location, that's multi-tenant, and that's gonna have an impact on the value. So the quick answer would be it depends, and in the case of the subject, it's a standalone building, but it's, again, Mr. Chairman, I stress, this is more properly classified as an office. It's not a bank, it's an office building with a little bank round area in the main floor. So standalone for retail banks in good quality locations, if they're the same quality of location, a standalone is gonna fetch you a little more rent than a multi-tenant situation. But it all depends on the quality of the improvements, but also the location of the property. This location certainly is okay, but we're not talking about a retail or any kind of hub here. We're talking about the Lagimodier heading out, they're going past, as I say, sort of the Olive Garden and the Revenue Canada and all that. You're past that region though, and you're heading north. So it's not terrible, but they picked it for deliberate reasons, and that would have been cost of land and as far as the size that they could get to the building they can get on it. So it's not, when I look at the retail banks in those premium areas and sort of Grand Park Shopping Center, that's superior locations to this, I suggest, for retail banking purposes.
Okay, so yeah, it does, I've never been here, but it strikes me as a little awkward to get in and out of if you just want to get money out of the ATM.
If you're heading north on Lage, you're in great shape. If you're heading south, you've got to pull in, and it's not quite as good, but
Now, in terms of the, getting back to that excess, that land that you're talking about.
Sure.
Was there a requirement from the city that they put to, in order to develop that land, they had to have typically, let's say, no net increase in runoff? Would they put that kind of requirement on that?
I can't imagine this, and again, I'm gonna preface this by saying, quick answer is, I don't know for sure. But I can't imagine that Steinbeck Credit Union would have gone to the expense and trouble of setting up this the way they did with the pipes running and having that retention pond set up unless the city mandated that they do so in this particular area. But it's as Mr. Swatsky was getting at, aside from the mint, which is very interesting, but I've encountered lots of situations where there's separately assessed parking lots. I haven't encountered a whole lot where there's like a separate retention pond for runoff from the subject. I mean, you've got retention ponds in residential areas and industrial areas. There are huge retention ponds set up. This is like a mini version of that, and it's somewhat unusual, I'd suggest.
Yeah, because most of those retention ponds are public.
Exactly, yeah, and they're huge, and they serve, you know, very significant areas, as opposed to, all this is serving is the subject. There's, as far as I know, there's nothing else going on there, so it is odd.
Okay, all right, so do you have any questions or anything?
Who is owner of this adjusted lot?
Of the adjacent lots, Steinbeck Credit Union,
It's belong both.
they're both owned by Steinbeck Credit Union,
All right, so you can then go into your presentation of the management.
Mr. McIntyre, I'm sorry. Okay, so recall, Mr. Chairman, that I'd asked Ms. Shable if the department had previously applied for 5%, an additional 5% for unrecovered expenses. They have. They have for all commercial, industrial, and retail properties. And I understand Ms. Shable said it's a new assessment cycle. I totally agree, but our position certainly is that that 5% allowance was there for a reason and should, without a doubt, continue. So turning to page 1, this is a non-recoverable expense allowance debate. We're suggesting that the assessor has, and for the first time, certainly every material that we've seen so far, all materials we've seen, we have removed, excuse me, that 5% expense allowance that was historically given. Shown as, and this is important, shown as management, quote-unquote management, and I put that in quotes. We're convinced that the title of management is, always has been and is very misleading, and it has in fact now created considerable confusion as to what the intent of the allowance actually is and was. So what it is not, I'm at the middle of page 1 now, and I want to be very clear at the outset on this. What it is not, in our opinion, this is not an expense related to the standard management fees charged by the owner or third-party property manager relating to the day-to-day operations of the property. On this point, the assessment department and we fully agree. On a net lease, the net lease structure has been in place for decades. Under a net lease, typical net lease structure, management fees form a part of the recoveries from tenants under the specific terms of the lease. No debate about that. But our whole point is this: that is not what this allowance was ever intended to relate to. And here's why it should. Here's what we believe it should be, or what it is, and why it should be restored. The allowance we're suggesting this afternoon is a stabilized expense involving a number of typical. These are expenses that typically come up with proper operation and management, and they're non-recoverable. Even with tenants on net leases, they are entirely non-recoverable. There's no lease out there that provides for the recoveries of the expenses that we're going to discuss this afternoon. It's for that reason that we're saying the 5%, it was always intended to cover those non-recoverable expenses and should be restored. So there's, now at the bottom of page 1, there's, Mr. Shields has brought it to our attention, has suggested that the 1994 manual that we quote here was based upon a document that was, he's raised concerns that we have certainly taken into account. So I've got some other materials, but I'm going to not refer, and I'm going to ask the board not to refer to the attachments relating specifically to the 1994 manual. As I say, I've got some replacement materials, but we have heard Mr. Shields' concerns, and so we're going to abide by that, and we're going to present this board with materials relating to subsequent manuals. So subject to a review of those materials, which effectively say the same thing, for the moment, I'll go on to some of the other, what some of the other jurisdictions and what appraisal theory says about this allowance. So at the top of, pardon me, top of page 2, we've presented in these materials a quote from Case Studies in Appraisal from the Sauter Street business. And what that appraisal text, pardon me, states, just take a sip of this so I can prevent my coughing from interfering too much. The appraiser should also account for non-recoverable expenses, also called non-rechargeable expenses. The most important non-recoverable cost items to be aware of are space marketing costs, which include both tenant inducements and leasing costs, and I stress the leasing cost part, and an allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. The other cost associated with leasing space is, of course, leasing fees or commissions. Now we go on page 2, we took a look at what some of the other provinces were doing concerning the non-recoverable expenses. SAMA is the Saskatchewan assessor's valuation guide. In the SAMA guide, they say establish net operating income, NOI, states the operating expenses that are not recovered must be deducted from the effective gross income to obtain the NOI from the property. Where leases are signed on a net rent basis, the tenant also agrees to pay his or her share of the operating expenses, again, including management fees, no dispute. But going further down, even on a net rental basis, and I'm on that at the very end of that paragraph, even on a net rental basis, however, there are 2 areas where the property owner must cover expenses. Non-recoverable operating expenses, expenses which are not passed on to the tenants, and vacant space shortfall. And I'll dispense with the shortfall discussion. The department's properly put the shortfall, continue with the shortfall allowance as we have. That's a non-issue. So the vacant space shortfall, there's no concerns there. So at the bottom of page 2, the manual goes on to state the EGA must be reduced by the amounts of non-recoverable operating expenses and vacant space shortfall that is typically reflected in the marketplace for the various classes of office buildings, such adjustments supported by market evidence and analysis. Now, going on to page 3, this is still from that same manual. I'm just going to skip down to what they say non-recoverable operating expenses typically are, and they're not included in the lease. Those include legal and audit fees, structural repairs, advertising, promotion, and lastly, leasing commissions. So leasing commissions, as you'll see, Mr. Chairman, forms a significant component within our study, and that certainly is a recurring cost that is associated with proper and competent management. We're suggesting should properly be reflected in the 5% allowance. We then went on to the impact methodology guide, impact being, of course, the Ontario assessing organization. Their valuation, pardon me, their valuation guide is dated January 1st. Oh, incidentally, the question was posed in an earlier hearing. That SAMA guide is, the most current guide was from January 15th, so just for data reference for that guide. Impact methodology guide, valuation date January 1st, 16, establish net operating income. And again, skipping to the bottom, I won't go through this all, but skipping to the bottom, net operating income equals effective gross income minus non-recoverable operating expenses. Non-recoverable operating expenses, the difference between the total operating expenses and the total income recovered from the tenants. And a component of that we're suggesting would be reflected in the 5% allowance to, in fact, account for some of these non-operating expenses that arise. Again, page 4, it's largely this similar in principle. They talk there at the middle, sort of towards the middle of the page, there are typically 2 areas where the property owner has to cover expenses, again, even assuming that leases. Non-recoverable operating expenses which are not passed on to the tenants, such as legal and audit fees, advertising and promotional fees, and what we're suggesting, leasing commissions. And then expenses with operating any vacant space, which again is shortfall, no contention, no issue with the shortfall rate. So going on further down, the impact market valuation reports for office and retail properties states that operating expenses can be categorized as recoverable and non-recoverable. Recoverable expenses are those operating expenses that are recovered from tenant as outlined within the lease and are typically recorded as recoverable income. But then they go on to say, even with triple net lease, there are expenses associated with operating buildings that are not necessarily passed through to the tenant, but rather absorbed by the owner. And these are the expenses we're talking about this afternoon. So, moving on to page 5. Now, here's a term, and the assessors correctly raised this term that I've applied. I've applied a term called effective market income. That is one and the same, and it's my fault. I used the incorrect moniker for it. That is EGI. When you look at the valuations, the assessor's valuation and the term is used effective gross income as we've used in our valuation as well. That's the term I should have used, and that is what I'm asking this board to translate effective market income as to effective gross income, one and the same thing. But we're suggesting that the valuation methodology involving the deduction of that 5% stabilized expense when using the income approach is firmly established. And by removing that 5%, the assessor has now failed to account for typical non-recoverable expenses. This is inconsistent with both appraisal theory and the actual demonstrable non-recoverable expenses that are incurred on a regular basis in connection with competent management and operation of properties. So going to the page 5 at the middle, we reviewed a great many income statements for the purposes of preparing and presenting this study, and there were a number of consistent themes as to which expenses were shown sort of quote-unquote below the line, shown as non-recoverable. They included leasing commissions, TI allowances, free rent, marketing, advertising, bank service charges and fees, mortgage interest, bad debt expense, professional fees, owner building maintenance. That's not, of course, the regular maintenance that's typically recovered, but rather owner-absorbed building maintenance costs, asset management fees, various financing fees, covenant fees and such, depreciation, and utilities for vacant units. So to be clear, and again I say this, Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of yourself and Mr. Swatsky, who haven't heard this before, there are a number of, the bulk of these items are not included in the calculation of our percentages. These, as shown, shown on pages 5 to 6, the following non-recoverable expense lines were not included and don't form part of our calculations. Owner building maintenance, the reason we didn't put that in is because we're suggesting the 2%, what's historically been called the other allowance, that was intended to be, and we're still treating it as a structural allowance that would cover owner building maintenance items. So we're not including that in our calculations. Financing fees, mortgage interest, for reasons that I imagine are self-evident, those are never included in our assessments and our appraisal, and we're not including it here. Depreciation, again, not included in assessment methodology or appraisal methodology, very valid way to reduce your income tax for CRA's purposes, but not appropriate here, we're not including it. Utilities for vacant units, covered by shortfall, not including it. Bad debts, covered by the vacancy allowance, not including it. So what it comes down to, Mr. Chairman, is based on our review of the 3 years, 15, 16, and 17, for the properties that we list on the following page, there were 4 items that we've included in our calculations. Leasing commissions, professional fees, asset management fees, and advertising marketing. Those calculations for just those 4 items, which forms the crux of our study, are shown on the column that is currently labeled percentage of EMI. Again, I'm asking you to read that as EGI. Pardon me, it's percentage of EMI 3-year average with no TI. For the board's reference, we have also included a second category that includes TI allowances, but we are not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that that should be used as a baseline, because those TIs we do not think would form a proper part of the 5% allowance, but certainly the other 4 items would. So turning to page 7, second last column from the right, the percentage of EMI 3-year average no TI. That's the column I'm asking the board members this afternoon to focus on. Ranges from a low of 2.77%, as shown at the bottom, index number 32, up to as high as 31.05%. Obviously, and we'll demonstrate this shortly, there can be an extremely wide variation in non-recoverable expenses year over year, and the primary function of that is that leasing commission. Some years you could have it 0, some years it can form a very significant part of your income, and hence the wide variety of percentages, and even within those percentages, the wide variety of percentage within a given year. So the average and median, as shown at the bottom of page 7, for that key category is 7.42% average and a 5.75% median. Turning then to page 8, the structural allowance. So I mentioned briefly that the 2% we're treating as the continuation of the structural allowance. We believe that allowance, if anything, is somewhat conservative, but certainly well supported by the data. We performed a quick audit. This isn't meant to be comprehensive, but it's rather a quick audit of certain properties where we could determine what the costs were that would relate to the structural items, the actual capital items. And the reason that it's not always evident is because these items typically will not show up on the income statement. They're going to be capitalized, they're going to show up on the balance sheet, but they're not going to be reflected on the operating statement for the property. So we're only able to glean that information based on those statements where either in the assessor's form, if you recall, in the income and expense questionnaires, there is actually a segment for capital costs. Some, not many, but some owners actually use that form, And some of those owners put in the capital costs, so that formed part of our review here. And then also a review of some of the other information we had with the actual balance sheets. As you can see on the chart on page 8, it ranges from a low of 2.81% to a high as 58.9%. Not intended to be comprehensive, but certainly suggestive that the 2% rate is very, very appropriate, if not somewhat low. So going to page 9, the conclusion that we've come to in all of this is that based on the review of our information and the review of the 3 years worth of statements, pardon me, for the properties that we've put on the chart, that the 5% unrecovered, the 5% allowance for the unrecovered expenses, which is what the intent of this allowance has been from the get-go, should be restored, and to not do so will inflate an NOI and would result in an inappropriately high valuation. So just to quickly run through the board members with, I mentioned earlier, some of the wide variations in the percentage expenses. So from pages 10 through 18, are the year-by-year listing of the expenses and the effective gross income, incorrectly labeled as EMI, but effective gross income, the individual years with the expenses and what those expenses relate to. That's all set out in this chart. And just by way of example, the second index on page 10 now, number 2, Sargent Avenue, the 3-year average there was 15.1%, certainly at the high end of the range. But even within that, you can see that in 2016, the percentage was as low as 2.72%, and in 2017, it was as high as 37%. That's a function of the leasing commissions, but that's exactly why we're saying the 5% represents the appropriate stabilized allowance, because you know when you've got these properties, leasing commissions are going to come up. Your buildings, there's going to be vacancies. You're going to have to pay these leasing commissions to to fill your building, fill vacancies, actually even on renewals. And we're suggesting that's an appropriate allowance to account for that, along with the marketing, advertising, the professional consulting fees, and the asset management fees. So again, moving on, for instance, I'll just give one more example. Page 15. And I'm at index number 20 now, just again for the board's reference. There we've got another property with in 2017 it was very low. The expense listed in that year was only 1.49%, but 2 years earlier it was 10.81%, resulting in an average of 4.91% over the 3-year period. So these expenses do fluctuate, but certainly with the mean and median of the 32 properties we presented, over the 3 years, the 5% is exceptionally well supported, if not a little bit more. I had mentioned earlier the replacement reserve and the sort of the spot audit that we had done. Just for the board's reference, those details are located at pages 19 through 22. And I'm not going to dwell on that because it doesn't form a significant, no contention on the 2%. Certainly we wanted to provide some support for that allowance. Pardon me. I'm almost done, Mr. McIntyre. Pages 23 through 25, I mentioned a quote from the appraisal text, and this is located on this page for the board's reference. I'm asking the board now, please, to disregard, and I don't know if you want to strike a line through it, but pages 26 through 28, please disregard it. Based on the concerns raised by Mr. Shields, I will have more to present on that point as far as the what the department's statements were in subsequent manuals, but we have no wish to, well, just put it this way, please just disregard those pages for the purposes of this particular presentation. Next page I would refer the board to would be page 33, and this is out of the assessor's 2018 general assessment model. General assessment parameters, and again, the only purpose of presenting this is to show that indeed the 5% rate was applied for properties, industrial properties, at page 33, and then going to page 36. This is the, I believe it's the retail, yeah, this is the retail parameters for 2018, again, including the 5%, and going back pages 37 through 39 is 2014 general assessment, showing the same information. Pages 40 through 47 are copies of the impact guide that I referred to in the study. Now, the sequence of this is less clear to me. I believe it would be appropriate, and I don't know what the department's going to apply or submit as far as rebuttal to this study goes. If it's consistent with previous submissions, then I think it would make sense for me to file my survey rebuttal to it afterwards rather than anticipated. So perhaps subject to that submission and then my survey rebuttal, I'm certainly open to questions on the study from the board members in shape.
Okay,
Second.
You can submit a rebuttal, yes. She's got a rebuttal. Okay, proceed with your rebuttal.
On page 2nd, introduction. To develop the 2020 general assessment model, assess taxation department analyze and expense information where management was recovered to derive model generate net operating income net of management expenses. Therefore, the model generated net operating income developed through a simple interest valuation are already net of management expenses. Assessment taxation department has also allowed for non-recoverable expenses. Non-recoverable expenses include general 2% expense allowance and shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy. The 2% general expense allowance was always intended to include expenses incurred by the landlord that are not recovered by tenants. Those expenses could include advertising, promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, etc. Previous jargon at the Board of Revision may have referred to the 2% general expense allowance as a structural repairs allowance. This jargon was overly simplified. The rebuttal package justified the following. The historic 5% management expenses was in fact an expenses related to the standard management fee charged by the owner. The expenses Altus Group determined as non-recoverable are contrary to the assessment case law in Manitoba and are not to be treated as expenses. On page 3, we have management adjustment, order number A-05-018. Relevant fact. Expenses relating to the management of the building were being fully recovered by the owner on the term of the lease. No deduction for management expenses was permitted. So we're talking about a municipal board order that supports the position that the historic 5% management expenses was an expenses related to the standard management fee charged by the owner or the property manager related to the day-to-day operation of the property. Another order on page 4, order A-05-017. Relevant facts. Expenses relating to the management of the building were not being fully recovered by the owner under the term of the lease. Deduction of 3% for management expense was permitted as this cost was only partially recovered by the owner. Non-recoverable expenses, Alto Group can include the following non-recoverable expenses and their analysis: leasing commission, tenants inducement, tenants improvement allowance, free rent. The inclusion of these not recoverable expenses in contrary to the municipal board case law. There is a long-standing history of municipal board order stating that these items should not be treated as expenses. Below are three municipal board orders indicating this. Order number 8-97280. Tenants improvements, leasing commission, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purpose of calculating this market value. Another order, 8-99-026. Tenants improvements, leasing commission, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purpose of calculating market value. These items should not be treated as expenses. And third order, 8-07-087. Tenants inducement, including free rent, do not reflect the market and will be given no weights in calculating of net operating income. All these full municipal board orders you can see in agenda. The expenses Altus Group determined as non-recoverable are typically important when using a discounted cash flow method of analysis. Asset management fees are non-allowable operating expense items. On page 7, we talk more about asset management fee. Altus Group incorrectly incorporate asset management fee into the non-recoverable operating expense item in their analysis. The real estate and asset management job is to minimize returns for their investor portfolios of properties, typically for corporation or real estate investment trusts that have multiple real estate holdings. The Institute of Real Estate Management has established a common core list of functions for asset management. IRM states that asset managers are those who reside in a different place in control principle of real estate, establish capital stake, determine investment strategy, owning strategy, return bundles, establish and manage how return and key assess control principle will be addressed, determine leverage, determine and manage the structure of ownership. As derived above on page 8, assessed management is an arm of business and investment decision-making for corporation. Asset management has holding to do with the direct day-to-day operation of an individual property. Therefore, asset management expenses are not an allowable operating expense item when valuing commercial properties. Altus Group use, on table, 1 second. Page 7, agent evidence. In my page 12, my evidence, we will talk about this table. The use of media rather than average change, the result of Altus Group analysis in conclusion from 5.75% to 7.8%. It's a yellow column, or maybe it's black. And also, last two columns, we did our search. After analyzing the effective gross income for several indicated in the Altus Group study, Assessment and Taxation Department has determined the range of non-recoverable expenses, net of vacancy shortfall, is between 0.36% and 3.82% of effective gross income with media of 1.1 to 0%. ATD methodology is consistent with the Saskatchewan, and Ontario impact jurisdiction. Please open page 14. CAM evaluation guide is Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. In the reference material is from serious evaluation guidance that have been adapted from an Alberta handbook entitled Market Value Mass Appraisal for Property Assessment in Alberta. I would like to point, it's a study for 2015-2016. Right now we in 2018 effective years. So maybe they have another already. It is assessment taxation position that the methodology described is a material from CAMA is consist with our own, saying the described jurisdictional exception established by case law in Manitoba, same with impact methodology guide. Assessment taxation department has followed a methodology that it consists with other jurisdiction in Canada. In Manitoba, there are jurisdictional exceptions determined by the case law that direct which non-recoverable expenses can be included. I'm off. I'm done.
Okay, do you have questions on her rebuttal?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll have some questions, and then in due course, when the board's asked the questions, I'll have a little bit of rebuttal to present. Ms. Shable, thank you for this presentation. Turning initially, please, to page 12, because I want to be clear on what the department's done when they're quoting their statistics. So what the department's done there is simply taken out for those properties that are listed, the department's taken out the leasing commissions, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We take license commissions, in tenants improvement, inducement.
Well, tenant inducements we didn't include either, except in that one category that I mentioned, but the main point being, the department's taken the position that leasing
Include, you
commissions
have
are
last
removed.
columns.
Mhm. Okay, so they removed leasing commissions, then turning to page 5 though, so that's what the department's done, I think under the theory, if I remember right, of jurisdictional exception is the term that's been used. Bottom of page 5 though, so to be clear, Ms. Shable, the department, if I'm going to read this, we do not dispute that these items, the non-recoverables, are considered non-recoverable expenses in the appraisal theory literature. Given the extent of the assessment case law and the prominence of municipal work, the exclusion of these items would form, quote-unquote, a jurisdictional exception in QSPAP. So that's the position of the department, is that the board has provided the department, and you're suggesting should be applied here, a jurisdictional exception, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then let's turn, pardon me, Ms. Shable, please, I'll go through these board orders briefly. So now, Mr. Chairman, the page numbering starts again at 1 with the attachments. So now, for the next while, I'll be referring to the page numbers of the attachments, not the menu. So page number 3 of the attachments, which is page 3 of Municipal Board Order A05018. So Ms. Shable, now there, at the bottom of the page, Mr. David Saunders, who's a former colleague of mine, what he was asking the board to do in that case was reflecting, at the bottom there, last paragraph, this amount that Mr. Saunders used reflected the contract rent adjusted for 1 month per year free rent payable under the current multi-year lease for the premises found in the reference year. And then the board goes on to state on the first paragraph of the next page, page 4 of the order, however, consistent with the board's established practice of disregarding leasing incentives when calculating rental income, the board's not prepared to make adjustment to the contract rent. So what the board was saying is we're not gonna calculate an NER effectively, a net effective rent, by taking off the free rent every year, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Then moving on to your attachment, page 11, please. This is another order that you've alluded to. So, Ms. Shabon, what the board said in that case, first full paragraph on page 11, that we can agree, the board said, the board is prepared to accept a management expense when it's clear that management-related costs have either not been recovered at all or only partially recovered. We can agree they made that statement, correct?
Yes, a deduction of 3% for management expenses was determined as the
Mhm,
costs
yeah.
were only partially recovered
Yeah,
by the owner.
precisely, that there were some non-recoverables in there, and then as a result, I was gonna, thank you for saying that, because I was gonna allude to that next, lower down, they applied a 3% in that case, based on the evidence provided in that hearing, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And that was to account for the non-recovered, or only partially recovered management-related expenses. So going then to page 17 of your attachments again. And this is Board Order A99026. And we can agree again with the position of the owner in that case. It says the assessor did not permit any deduction for tenant inducements. The owner's agent says it was necessary to offer tenant inducements, being leasehold improvements or money for leasehold improvements, or in some cases free rent, simply to commence tenancy. And what the board says on the next page under tenant inducements, that's item number 4 on the next page, the board reiterates that tenant inducements, leasing commissions, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for the purposes of calculating market value. Again, what the agent was looking for in that case was a calculation of a dollar-for-dollar deduction from the potential market income to come up to a net effective rent, correct?
Tenants improvement, leasing commission, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for purpose of calculating market value. This item should not be treated as expenses. It's first point in my relevant facts.
Yes, so the owner was looking for a net effective rent, correct? Based on they say it was, what they said on page, item number 4 on the previous page, the owner's agent says it was necessary to offer tenant inducements, or in some cases free rent, simply to commence tenancy. And they were looking, the owner's agent says that the board's past policy not allowing tenant inducements is wrong. And so what they were looking for was a net effective rent, correct? And then, but then, again, on a similar vein, going to page 20, and this is that same order, 20 and 21, I guess, the board, there's 2 segments to this property, but the board in each case did allow for non-recovered management-related expenses, 5% allowance in these 2 cases, correct? Based on the evidence provided at that hearing? If you see the management expense down at the bottom of page 20, they applied that, and then on the next page, they also applied the 5% for the non-recovered management-related expenses. Okay, then, going to your page 36, please, of your attachments, that's the next municipal bill order. Pardon me. Now, I'm going to direct Ms. Shaver, yourself, and the board members, so there's only 2 full paragraphs. In the second full paragraph, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line. At this sentence that start, the rent used by Mr. DuPont for the restaurant was based on the deduction of an amount for free rent. The board has consistently taken the position that tenant inducements, including free rent, do not reflect the market and will be given no weight. Again, Ms. Shavel, it appears that Mr. DuPont was looking for a net effective rent calculation, correct?
Tenants inducement including free rent do not reflect the market and will be no given weight in calculation
Indeed,
of
so-
net operation income.
Indeed, so they did not accept the notion that you should take a top-line deduction, dollar for dollar, of all these things and come up with a net effective rent. But then going on to page 38, 2 pages over, the board did still allow the non-recoverable component of management-related expenses of 5%, correct?
Yeah, because it was, city department was applied 5% in years too.
Well, that's my very point, is that there
Yeah,
was an
because
appropriate
it
allowance
was-
for the non-recoverable
It's for real
expenses.
2020 reassessment,
Yeah.
we change our policy.
And are you familiar with the cases, some of the cases down the line refer to a couple of municipal board decisions, very old 97, 98 decisions, and are you aware that, I know one of them involved the Richardson building, are you aware that actually in the first case that was quoted in subsequent cases, the appellant actually just withdrew his NER calculation? He withdrew his submission on the NER calculation? If there's any doubt, I can refer you to your page 41 of your attachments where they talk about the quote out of that municipal board order. So page 41 of your attachments, the board in that order was stating this question, the question of NER calculations off the top line has been dealt with by the board in several recent orders, in particular municipal board order A94196, which was the first decision, I believe, dealing with the Richardson building where it was indicated considerable evidence was heard concerning the value, effect on value of tenant inducements. The respondent ultimately abandoned the position that value should be reduced to reflect the tenant inducements, and in that case, it appears again that they were looking for an NER calculation. So you're familiar with that quote, that they abandoned that position, correct?
Mhm.
And you understand we're not suggesting that an NER, net effective rent calculation, should be done either, correct? We're not asking for the dollar for dollar deduction off the top line rent. You understand that distinction, correct?
With respect to that, I mean, the order is the order, we can read it here and it says what it says, so.
Understand, the last question was understanding the distinction. We're not asking for an NER calculation as opposed to the non-recoverable 5%, but I'll leave it at that.
Tenants improvements, leasing commission, and leasing incentives are not expenses which may be used to reduce income for purpose of calculating this market. For this specific case, 8-972-280.
Indeed, and that's again, if you recall, I'll leave it with the board. It was an NER request, so I won't belabor that. Ms. Shavelin, I'm going to be very brief on this. You're familiar, the department's raised the suggestion that the deduction of these amounts, the NER calculation effectively is particularly important with the DCF, and I understand that. But you understand we're using a direct capitalization and we're not requesting the NER, and therefore the DCF method has no application in the present case. You understand that, correct?
You talk about discounting cash flow?
We're not using the discounted cash
You
flow.
don't use
We
it,
can agree
you're
on
not
that.
allowed.
Right. But the department at the same time isn't suggesting it's not a valid stabilized deduction. You're saying you're agreeing with an appraisal theory, but it's a jurisdictional exception. That's the crux of the position, correct? A jurisdictional exception. Actually, Mr. Chairman, that question's been asked and answered, that's fine. Just a couple more questions.
The principal anticipation, the ability of a property to generate future benefits in fundamental for the income approach to value. While it is true, Manitoba legislation requires us to develop a retrospective options as of April 1st, 2018 of market value. The Manitoba case law states that we cannot look at the economic condition past April 1st, 2018.
I don't disagree with that. We can't try and cheat the reference date by bringing in evidence of what happened after the reference date. That's fundamentally different. You mentioned the principle of anticipation, and I'll have materials on that point in a second. But the principle of anticipation is that very thing. You're putting yourself in the shoes of a willing buyer as of April 1, 2018, correct?
Mhm.
And what drives value for properties that are valued on the income approach, as this property is your anticipation of the income stream that you will get from that property based on the economic conditions and what's known as of the reference date. We can agree on that, correct?
We look economic condition on our reference date, April 1st, 2018, 2 years previous.
We're getting kind of into the minutia of
Yeah,
valuation that
we certainly are. and I'm
everyone's
raising-
familiar with, so.
Yeah, yeah. I will have more in rebuttal. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now we're on questions on his presentation. Do you have any more questions on his presentation?
No.
Okay, Ed, you got any questions on Mr. Reimer's?
Well, that's a lot of information to digest.
We'll put it this way, questions either on the city's rebuttal or Mr. Reimer's direct.
Well, I'm trying to summarize what I've heard.
You know what then? And I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. Then I'm gonna ask, this will be very brief, but I'm gonna ask for Sir rebuttal based on the assessor's rebuttal. It was in fact what we anticipated. It's what we'd seen previously, so there's just a couple of points I wanna bring across.
Okay.
So, now, I have prepared one for every one of your files,
Okay.
plus 4.
Okay, thank you.
And similarly with this one, so that's package number.
And in order to speed presentations, we will assume this evidence is in for all.
Please, yes.
It's
I wanna
brand
have a
new
discussion.
information, I reject.
It's so well, I'll wait till they're handed out.
I reject both because it's brand new information, I didn't have time to look on that.
Okay, so you're objecting to
Both of them.
both of them as being new information?
Mhm.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess I'd say a couple of things. The department's raised a concern. The reason I asked this board and Ms. Shable to disregard the references to the 94 manual is specifically in response to concerns expressed by Mr. Shields. However, the statements made in the 94 manual were carried forward verbatim into the 98 manual and the 2002 manual, and it goes to very much, in our opinion, fundamentally what the intent of this non-recoverable 5% was in the first place. So, I guess I'd suggest to Ms. Shable, it's a distinction without a difference. If you wanted to refer to your 1994 manual, which Mr. Shields has objected to us and which I'm respecting, then simply cross-reference the information in the subsequent manuals with the 94 manual, and it's exactly the same thing. So the information contained should not be a surprise in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
We have new manual, 2020 assess value.
Well, I understand Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
and
the
plus,
debate.
why
the
look
debate
for
re-
history?
The debate
Let's be
relates to,
present.
the debate
Our
relates.
reference day, April 1st, 2018, not
Okay,
valid.
let's, we understand your objection and this is new material.
Okay, well, you know what, Mr. Chairman, then I'm gonna suggest this. If there's a concern that this is new and it's new to the assessor, take a look then for reference only. Take a look at the material I presented, compare it for reference only with the materials in the original
Well,
submission.
we're not concerned about whether it was word for word or what, we're just concerned whether this is new or not.
But this is my point. If you take for reference, you compare the documents with our SOAR rebuttal to the information contained on page 27, which is from the manual I've asked that the assessor objected to, you will see the wording is identical and there is no
Well,
surprise.
the question is, did you or did you not have an opportunity to include this in your?
No, because, and the reason is this, the objection of the assessor came up 2 days ago, like 10 days or 12 days after our submission was filed. So, we're responding to it, we're respecting it, but we're not going to be content to have evidence which we believe is relevant be suppressed. That's why we're now presenting, we're accepting without question at this stage Mr. Shields' concerns with respect to the 94 manual, but the 98 and the 2002, the wording is entirely consistent with what's here. So this is the first opportunity we've had,
Okay,
given those concerns. And we believe it goes to, it's very relevant because it goes to what the intent was of the salons.
But the SOAR rebuttal then would have to be based on what was presented in her
Indeed,
rebuttal.
indeed, and her rebuttal, Mr. Chairman, to be clear, her rebuttal is saying it was never the intent to have this expense cover non-recoverable expenses, and it very much was, and that's what this document shows. That's what the 94 document shows. We agreed as a courtesy, and based on Mr. Shields' concerns, we agreed to not refer to it, but then to not allow the same wording on what is the department's own documents for 98 and 2002, in our respectful opinion, amounts to an attempt to suppress evidence. And that's relevant. The department doesn't think it's relevant, we think it's very relevant. And I'm asking the board to therefore accept it.
Okay, we're gonna have to caucus on whether
Thank
we
you.
accept this or not.
Thank you.
Okay, we deliberated and because of the late nature of the objection from the city assessor in that, we will agree to review this and we'll assign what weight we will to this.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on that, you know what, I'll just,
In this case, can I submit my evidence? It was not attached to my brief.
Is it
To
relevant
support
to these?
down, yes, to 2% of non-apply, not comply.
Is it relevant to these two?
It's relevant to my case.
Can I will take a look at it.
To support our, this,
I won't look at it.
up now, each brief will be, this document will be attached to each briefs, but when I submit, it was not ready yet.
This is, in my opinion, this is totally new and is not, could be part of your main.
It's just support of our capitalization rate, sample
no,
tabel, and non-operation expenses,
At this point.
support document.
Yeah, we'll not permit this. And
But for records, I object new documents. But it's your decision to listen.
Okay, so
Right.
very quickly on these.
so our only point, Mr. Chairman, and I'm only gonna go through this on one page, page 4 of that document. It gets to what we believe the intent originally was, consistent with the department's approach. It says, even with net leases and competent management, there will still be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable from the tenants. That's our very point. We believe it shows the original intent, and I'll leave it at that. The second rebuttal component, I won't even get into because, Mr. Chairman, your comments are well received about getting into the minutia of appraisal theory. This talks about the principle of anticipation. The department's raised a concern with respect to the DCF and the OCR, overall capitalization, direct capitalization approach. Certainly it's should result in the same value, and these pages are intended to reinforce that this is a proper allowance in both the direct capitalization as it would be used in the DCF, albeit differently in the DCF, but it's a proper allowance for the direct capitalization approach as well. Subject to questions then, those are my comments. Thank you.
So, Mr. Sawatsky, any questions either on the city, on either brief on the,
No, I'm not gonna have any questions at this time.
okay.
None from me.
And I guess we've gone over this a lot, so I have no particular questions on this. So all this evidence we will consider to be in for each subsequent property we managed to deal with today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And let's take just a brief 5-minute dignity break. We'll go to next one, 67 St. Andrew Road.
File number 19-3554. Address 167 St. Anne Road. Roll number 0800-166-8500. We are valuing the property as it stands of January 1st, 2020, based on the economic condition April 1st, 2018. This appeal is with respect to the amount of assessed value only. Based on evidence in this record, It is assessor opinion that the market value of the subject property as of April 1st, 2018, is $734,000. In that, the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. Subject property is located southeast portion of the city of Winnipeg on the corner of St. Anne Road and Avondale Road. You can see a photo on my picture. Page 8 and 9 presented location map and photos. Rectangular shape of land area is 5,972 square feet. Main floor area 2,243 square feet. Basement area 910 square feet with leasable area of 3,153 square feet. Improvements was built in 1957. But it was interior alteration in 2004. You can see on page 12 permits. We did receive 2017 income expense information on April 26, 2018. This information presented on page 10 and 11. It was fully owner occupied with a little bit bigger square footage area, 3,382 square feet. A subject air photo also presented on page 2. On page 30, we're going straight to my bank rent comparables. First line and subject property. We estimate 3,153 square feet for applied $15.20 per square foot. I have presented 4 comparables with building age between 82 and 2001, with leasable area between 3,000 and 6,500. Media of my bank rent comparables came across $24.50. Current on page 4, we're going straight to my market income estimation. Our overall rent per square foot $15.20. Potential rent for this property $47,907. We did apply typical vacancy laws 2%. If that come at effective gross income equals $46,946. We did apply not recoverable expenses of 2% allowance that include advertising, promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, etc. And also we applied shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy, $8. A capitalization rate for this property was 6.2%, that very well supported by our table on page 6. It's range 6.2 to 7.3 suburban B area. By dividing net operation of our capitalization rate, estimate value of $734,000. On my page 13, bank rent comparables presented. Bank comparables on Portridge, signed lease in 2017 for $31 per square foot. On page 14, on Region Avenue West, sale 2017 lease for $25 per square foot. On Kivajian, 2016 lease for $24. And on page 16, my Region Avenue West, lease signed in 2015 for $23 per square foot. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion the market value of the subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $734,000. Is that the 2020 excess value should be confirmed?
Questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Shagle, the 6.20% cap rate, that's a model-driven cap rate?
Yes, it's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Okay, Ed, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
No questions.
No questions, and I have, well, I guess the question is, I have cap rate 6.2%, being an older, much smaller building than the previous property we just dealt with, which was the city's rate was 6.55 on that. Why is this a better property, or less risky property?
Because in this area, it's, for cap rate, we look for area 2 because we analyze on sale close to property on St. Anne Road and around. What cap rate of sale property for 2018 the assessment. So it's our comparable show this.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Non-recoverable, we've gone through all that, that's the first issue.
Yeah.
Page 13 I'm on now, and I'm gonna be extremely brief in some of these. So the remaining issue is cap rate. I'd asked Ms. Shagle about the mass appraisal cap rate of 6.20%. We're suggesting 7% for the reasons, if I can ask Mr. Chairman, that my commentary relating to the cap rate, including my reasons for saying there should be no compression, the range of data for the sales we presented, be carried forward to this hearing as well. The materials are in here as well. So the 7% is the same rate, and the pages are attached showing that the 7% was the rate applied for 2018. And for all of these reasons, including the data that we presented, we're suggesting 7% should remain. There should be no compression, and that results in a value of $617,000. No dispute on vacancy, no dispute on rent, no dispute on shortfall or other. It's just those two issues. Thank you.
Any questions?
No.
Any questions from the panel?
No questions? No questions.
Okay, I have none. Okay. Thank you for that. Succinct presentations. Item 3 on agenda 255, Mary.
File number 19-3868, 255 Marion Street, roll number 0609346171. We are valuing the property as a stand on January 1st, 2020, based on the economic condition as April 1st, 2018. This appeal is with respect to the amount of the assessed value only. Based on evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018, $2,426,000. In that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. The property is located west from downtown on 255 Marion Street and Towers Avenue. Area photo presented at page 8 and 9. Historical shape of land area is 15,503 square feet. Main floor area 6,154 square feet. It's include and also basement area 2,310 square feet. We have mezzanine of 3,964. It's presented. It's, when you look on my page 4, it's its last premise, 345,358. Leasable area of this improvements 12,428 square feet. We received all requested 2017 information on April 30, 2018. It's all information presented on my page 10. It's owner occupied. We have expenses to maintain these properties. I can bring attention that properties was Cambridge. I have permits for 1999 about alteration, interior alteration credit unions. It's Cambridge Credit Unions Limited. On page 3, we have rent comparables. First, it's my subject property. We apply for 12,428 square feet. Net rent per square foot, $13.78. I did present 4 comparables. Same Hotels property from 1982 to 2001. Square footage between 3,000 and 7,000 square feet with our media, $24.50. Bottom of the table you can see map, my rent comparables, everything suburban banks. By applying $13.78 overall for 12,428 square foot, our income potential rent on page 4 came across 171,000 roughly. We did apply vacancy loan, typical for this property 2%, so our effective gross income $178,000. We did apply non-recoverable expenses that include general 2% expenses allowance, that include advertising, promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, etc. And also we apply shortfall allowance per square foot to account for non-recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $8 per square foot. Now our net operation income, 163,000 roughly. We did apply overall capitalization rate 6.7%, that inside range of page 6. Our city of Winnipeg 20-80% is rate 6.2 and 7.3%. It's inside this range. So our estimate value come across 2,426,000. On page 12, we have my first comparables, air photo and photo of these comparables. Lease was signed in 2017 for $31 per square foot. On page 13, we have a bank on Regent Avenue, air photo and photo of bank presented. Lease signed in 2017 for $25 per square foot. On page 14, we have a bank on Kivadin Street for $24 per square foot. And on page 15, Origin Avenue West, rent for $23 per square foot. Based on as evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value for such a property as of April 1st, 2018, 2,426,000. In that, the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. That's my
Okay, questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, just a couple. Ms. Shable, page 4, the 6.7% cap rate, that's a model-driven cap rate.
okay.
And in this case, we can agree that the total leasable area is 12,428, but roughly half of that is basement and mezzanine space, correct?
Yeah,
The
it's
2310 and
yes.
3964.
Mhm.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, those are my questions.
Okay, Grant, any questions?
I have no questions.
Ed?
No questions.
And I have no questions, so I note from peeking ahead, I always read the last page of the book first, that there's no issue with regard to the rental rates.
Indeed, there isn't.
Seems to be the 5% and the cap.
5% in the cap, and in this case, the only thing I would add, on page 12, and again, similar as previously attached, the 2020 assessment confirmed by Ms. Shable, the calculation, excuse me, and the 2018. The 2018, in this case, the cap rate was 7.75%. We actually believe 7.75 was on the high side, so what I'm suggesting in this particular case, as you'll see on page 13, is 7.5%. So a slight compression of 25 basis points. Part of the rationale for the 7.5 though is half of the area relates to basement and mezzanine space, which poses an elevated risk, especially the mezzanine or the basement. The mezzanine being there's always a question as to how much, if any, rent you can generate from it. Half of the leasable area, but in fairness, it only represents, in our approach and in the department's approach, it only represents roughly 25% of the income stream, but still that 25% represented by those two areas, we believe would warrant the 7.5%, which is consistent with everything else we've presented, and ask the board to move accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Brent, questions?
What did they use the mezzanine for?
That is, I believe, office
Space.
Yeah, indeed.
No other questions?
Ed, questions?
No questions, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Item 4.
I'm sorry, we have 1 second break. I forgot
Sure.
my water.
Okay. Right. We'll just have a brief. So we convene with 1665 Henderson. Okay, so you can proceed with that.
I have rebuttal for this, it's after my presentation, yeah? For this specific property. File number 19-2489, address 1665 Henderson Highway, roll number 0400701750. Its owner Steinbach Credit Union Limited. This appeal is with respect to the amount of the assessed value only. We are valuing the property as it stands on January 1st, 2020, based of economic condition April 1st, 2018. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018, 789,000. And that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. Steinbach Credit Union Limited ATM kiosk is located on northeast portion of the city of Winnipeg. You can see on page 8 and 9 location of subject property. It has forest angle land area 21,964 square feet. Land area of this ATM kiosk 144 square feet.
If I can stop you there.
Mhm.
Okay, on your presentations, page 4 and 5, seem to be valuing just a kiosk,
Yeah, it's just one kiosk.
just the back of that?
Yeah, on roughly 22,000 square feet
Okay,
parking lot, you have a kiosk. Just,
so this is
Parking,
kiosk
yeah.
only,
mhm,
okay,
drive-through kiosk.
all right. I guess maybe I'm getting ahead of things, but this says, on your page 1, it says 789,000,
Yes,
and the valuation on page 4 seems to say 287,000? Is there an error, a transposing error, or?
oh yes,
Good catch.
sorry about that.
I had the same question, you beat me to it.
1 second. Yes, it's 789,000. It's mistake in my calculation. Sorry, I didn't look.
Okay.
On page 3, we have rent comparables for ATM kiosk. First, it's my subject property. We charge $115.31. I have three comparables on Ness, Marion, and St. Mary. You can see on bottom, on page 3, everyone. I have map of my comparables. It's a suburban area. Median of ATM net rent per square foot, $146.34. So our potential gross income, $16,605. We did apply for bank vacancy 2%. Our effective gross income 16,273. We account for expenses 2% not recoverable expenses, advertising, promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, and we also account for shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy. Our capitalization rate, we did apply 5.55%. And I'm missing land addition on land value of $502,000. So our estimate value of subject property, 789,000. On page 10, 11, you can see our, we receive income expenses mailed from the owner for 2017 information years and May 2nd, 2019. It has expenses to maintain this property. On page 12, we have ATM on Ness for $140 per square foot. On page 13, we have Marion ATM for $146.34 per square foot. And then page 14, on St. Mary ATM, $150 per square foot. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 $789,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed.
Any questions, Mr. Ryan?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Shable, you've asked the board and I to calculate an excess land value of $502,000, correct?
500,
502,000, and that's in order to get to your 789.
yes,
But
correct.
there's no evidence in here as to the
Yes.
area of the land, correct?
Yeah, I don't have evidence.
Yeah, no, and you know what, Mr. Chairman, I won't belabor this because there's just nothing there. So I will, I have a theory on this as far as highest and best use, but I'll address that in direct. Thank you.
Okay, any questions there?
No questions.
No questions.
No questions, okay. You didn't present any land sales for,
And as Lance said, my agent comparables very well support our assessed value for land. It's posted in my evidence.
is it?
No, I need to submit it yet.
So it's-
Rebuttal,
It's not in your main evidence?
no,
Land sales? I'll be objecting to submission of land sales. now.
Yeah.
it's not
That-
right
that is
sales,
something
it's
that
just my rebuttal for your comparables.
If it, I guess, Mr. Chairman, if it's rebutting the information contained in my, and correcting something, I have no problem with that.
It's correcting.
But, okay, if it's
But-
correcting,
but
if it's
by the
correcting the
way,
four that we
it's
have, I
very
have no issue
support.
with that. Perhaps we can look at it and I'll determine if I object.
Yeah, because it was just supporting land value, that should be-
Because you can do estimation, if 780,000 divided by a land area 21,964, it will come across $35.92 per square foot.
Mhm. Okay, I have no other questions, so you
Mr.
can.
Chairman, so my theory is simply this, the ATM doesn't represent the highest and best use. I don't have any issue with the department's income valuation for the property, but results in a value that's less than land value, in our opinion, so we're not using it. This is not the highest and best use. This is the use based on demand or lack thereof. This is the use they're putting to it now. If it were fully and properly utilized, however, it would not be an ATM site. It would be perhaps a small strip mall or something similar, maybe even multi-res if they can get the zoning. So we are treating this as highest and best use being as a developable piece of land. So if one turns to page 5, the comparables that we have presented, pardon me, they're on Henderson, 865 Henderson, 2018, February 2018, at 39.29, and then at 2033 Henderson, a 2015 sale at 26.54 a foot. Again, 865 Henderson, that was the same parcel that sold in 18, it was sold earlier for 19.50, so that certainly looks like someone made off with a fair chunk of change on that particular parcel over that 2-year period. And 775 Henderson, a 2016 sale at 1884, all zone C2. So based on those comparables, in fact, in that 865 Henderson, perhaps the 2016 sale was somewhat fortuitous, but certainly the 2018 sale seems like it was certainly a bit of an outlier at the high end, but we're suggesting a rate in this case of $27.50 a foot for a value of $604,000 as representing the highest and best use of the development site. And that's, we have, I won't go through them, but for the board's reference, we have the sale details attached. And that's our submission this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, questions?
I have rebuttal.
Okay, let's take a look at it first to see if it. Let me give it to Mr. Ryan to see if he has any objections to it first. Oh, these are two of the, okay, these are two of the properties, yeah, that were referred to.
In my rebuttal, only index second, 2033 Henderson. Land area showed 35,799 square feet. The price per square foot and showed us $26.54. The correct area is 26,000 square feet, The correct price per square foot is $36.54. On table below, you can see first line at subject properties. If transfer assessed value to sale price per square foot, it came across $35.92. And Henderson, agent index 2033 Henderson, $36.54. It's on my bottom. So it's very well support our value. And plus index first 6865 Henderson, $39.29. These two agent comparables very well support our assessed value.
Okay.
I have rebuttal to the rebuttal on my evidence.
Okay.
So if I could ask the board to turn to page 19. What happens from time to time is that the assessed value and the assessed area and the actual area is different, and that's because of perhaps sometimes the assessment lot lines don't line up with what's actually purchased. On page 19 is the record out of the real estate board's records. Middle of the page, land details, so you can see the assessed area, there's 26,000 feet. That's precisely what Ms. Shagel's presented. I get that, but that's an incorrect land area. The correct land area was that what was actually purchased was 35,799 feet. That's shown in the actual column under square foot there, 35799. So that is the area that was actually purchased, and that's shown in our material. So notwithstanding the difference, I believe this is a department error in recording the particulars of the sale, and that the actual area I submit is in fact 35,799. So I certainly stand by my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Ed, Brent, any questions?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
So do you have a surveyor's certificate? It seems to me that this is a significant difference.
Yes, huge difference.
It is indeed. So if you turn to page,
And same instrument phone number.
and the problem is this, that you can't, once the map has changed on the assessment department's records, you can't go back. So I am treating the Sabre record as correct with the actual area. Those are areas that would very specifically have been measured by the agent, and if they do that if they have an error on there, they do so at their peril. And the map for that acreage or that area is shown on page 20. So it's now been developed as a condo complex, but that map on page 20 is what represents, I believe, the 35,799 feet.
You know, I can see discrepancies on irregular shaped lots, but this is a rectangle.
Yeah, no, I believe the department actually, I believe the department used to have it as two roll numbers. And now it's just the one, like what they bought was the two roll numbers, but now the department's got it all, the 26,000 was only a portion based on the roll number at the time of sale, but two roll numbers were purchased, that's what I'm trying to say. And the 35,799 is now represented by that parcel shown on page 20.
So, okay, if I get this right, then two roll numbers were bought and merged and under the one address?
Either that or the department's records at 26,000 feet were wrong, and I gotta be careful because the parcel detail, there's only one roll number shown. So, I mean, I've seen it certainly where the roll numbers are combined and the areas end up being one total area under the new roll number, which is what I believed happened, but given that there's only one roll number shown here, I would have thought that would have been the case, but I'm certainly sticking, as I say, the 35,799 is gonna be a number that was very deliberately entered based on the real estate agent's knowledge of the property at the time, and that measurement would be, obviously they're gonna be held to be liable if the purchaser thinks they're buying 36,000 feet-ish of land and it turns out they've only got 26,000, there's a serious legal liability there. So that number would have been measured very, very carefully, and that's the number I believe that should govern here.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions. Here, making good progress here, so let's go towards downtown to 655 Henderson. Item number 5.
File number 19-3829, address is 655 Henderson Highway, roll number 020627806000. Owner the Sinabon Credit Union Limited. We are valuing the property as it stands of January 1st, 2020, based on economic condition on April 1st, 2018. This appeal is with respect to the amount of the assessed value only. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $1,330,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. The Sinabon Credit Union Limited is located northeast portion of the city of Winnipeg. Please open page 8 and 9. You can see location map, air photo of the property, rectangle shape of lot is 23,198 square feet. Main floor area 3,000. Improvements was built in 1977 with main floor area 3,721 square feet. Basement area 3,421 square feet. Usable area 7,142 square feet. We did receive income expenses information for 2017 and May 3rd, 2018. It's presented on my page 10 and 11. It's fully owner-occupied properties. We have expenses to maintain these improvements. On page 2, we have air photo of subject property again. It's corner of Henderson and Sydney Avenue. On page 3, I presented 4 comparables, bank rent comparables. First, it's subject property. For 7,142 square feet of leasable area, we did apply $13.16 overall. I did present 4 comparables, age, same as building between 1982 and 2001, with area between 3,000 to 7,000. In our median came across $24.50. On bottom of this page, presented map of my comparables. It's everything suburban banks. On page 4, our estimation for 7,142 square feet, overall rent $13.16. We have potential rent around $94,000. We did apply typical vacation laws 2%. Our effective gross income came across around $92,000. We apply expenses, not recoverable expenses, that include a general 2% expense allowance, that include advertising, promotion, professional fee, and structural repairs, and also shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $8 per square foot. Our net operating income $89,115. Overall capitalization rate of 6.7%. It's in our range on page 6. Suburban view offices between our range 20 percentile and 80 percentile. 6.2 to 7.3. It is our range that very well supported by Colliers, CBRE, Cushman and Beckfield. Our estimate value $1,330,000. On page 12, we have property on Portrait Avenue, first line, $31 is for bank. On page 13, Origin Avenue West, we have bank rent lease signed in 2017 for $25. On page 14, on Kivatin Street, lease signed in 2016 for $24. On Region Avenue West, lease signed in 2015 for $23 per square foot.
If you're using the same comparables as previously, you don't need to lead us through the comparables
Yeah,
again.
I must say, yeah.
Yeah, just say that.
Because it's all building, one comparative for new building, another comparables.
Yeah.
Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018, $1,330,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed.
Okay, questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, Ms. Shable, page 4 of your materials. So just under 50% of the subject, the leasable area of the subject, that's basement space, correct?
We value full building and I look for overall range,
So
rent per square foot,
yeah,
yeah.
so 3,421 square feet of the leasable area is basement space, correct?
Correct,
And the cap rate of 6.7%, that is the model-driven cap rate?
yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. No more questions.
Okay, anything in writing?
I have no questions.
No question.
No questions,
So, Mr. Chairman, this was a rerun of 2 properties ago, actually almost to a T. We've got basement area of 3,421 feet in this case, which we're suggesting poses an elevated risk to the income stream. It's usually the case that it's not generating any rent at all in the basement. And so what we're suggesting is, of course, the 5% non-recoverable that been mentioned, and I'm on page 13 now, I apologize. On page 13, we're suggesting a cap rate of 7.5%, as with 2 properties ago. The previous 2018 rate was 7.75%. That does seem a touch high, so even with the basement area here, we're suggesting 7.5%. For all the reasons we've talked about with no compression, the data, sales data we provided with the cap rate range, we believe 7.5% in this case is warranted, and we'll press accordingly. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions of?
There's no offices or basement storage down?
I think the basement is actually, there's a component that's used for office/lunchroom. That's why we've put the 575 rate on it.
Okay.
That's it for me.
All right, add anything?
The NOI is about the same?
Mhm.
Okay, no question.
You're doing great.
Progress, 200 regions.
Mr. Chairman, we actually do not take issue with the department's valuation of the subject in and of itself. This relates to, I talked earlier about the deduction of a separate land parcel. That's the only issue here, so to the extent that helps Ms. Shable
Okay.
in her presentation, then
Just briefly lead us through then your evaluation, and then we'll focus on the excess land or land in dispute.
File number 19-1848, address 200 Region Avenue West, roll number 0900283300, NTD Canada Trust. We are valuing the property as it stands of April 1st, 2020, based economic condition April 1st, 2019. This appeal is with respect to the amount of the assessed value only. Based on the evidence in this report and this assessor opinion that the market value of the subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $289,000. And that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed. TD Trust, Canada Trust is located northeast portion of the city of Winnipeg. Please open page 9 and 10. We can see location map, air photo of this property. Rectangle shape of land is 10,649 square feet. We have main floor area of 3,979 square feet. In mezzanine, 1,243 square feet with leasable area of 5,222. Improvements that was built in 1962. We did receive information from the owner for 2017 income expenses mailer and May 4, 2018. This information presented on page 11 through 12, 13. It's fully owner occupied. On page 2 we can have air photo. It's on corner Origin Avenue, Bond Street. I did presented 4 comparables similar with no, I have one extra. Okay. First line is subject property for 5,222 square feet. We did apply overall $15.80 per square foot. 4 comparables located on region Pembina, and Pembina again, with median of $24 per square foot. Leasable area between 3,000 to 9,000. Lease signed in 2015 and 2017. Photo of all my comparables presented on the bottom map. Currently it is a property posted for sale, so it's banned, but I presented on page 4 office rent comparables, also in case, because its building can be office. So my 4 comparables on Taylor, Henderson, Region and Provincia Boulevard, from 1,000 to 5,000 square feet, 5,700 square feet, with median of $16.93. We did apply $15.80. With map under table. On page 5, all work up. Our potential net income came across around $83,000. We did apply typical 2% vacancy loss for banks. Our effective gross income, $18,875. We did apply not recoverable expenses of 2% allowance for advertising, promotion, professional fee, structural repairs, and also shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $8 per square foot. Our capitalization rate for this property is 7.2%, that align with our range on page 7. Our range 7.2, 7.3, that's aligned together with Colliers, CBRI, and Cushman Wakefield. Our estimate value of $1,089,000. On page 14, start all my comparables. Bank on region and rent and 2000 lease and 2017 lease for $25 per square foot. On Pembina lease, 2017 lease for $32,000 per square foot. On Region lease 2015 for $23 per square foot. Lease on Pembina, very old, 2015 for $18 per square foot. On page 18, I presented office rent comparables. Lease signed in March 2018 for $16.85. It's very similar to subject property. On Henderson Highway, lease signed in 2017 for $16 per square foot. On Region Avenue West on page 20, lease signed in 2017 for $18.93. And Provincia on page 21, lease signed in 2017 for $17. Based on the evidence and this report is assessor opinion that market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 in $1,089,000 and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed.
Okay, questions, Mr. Ramos?
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. My only question, Ms. Shable, were you familiar or were you aware of the fact that the parking lot across the street at 205 Bond Street was owned by the same owner and it serves the subject? Were you aware of that?
It's a completely different roll numbers, it's not relevant to subject property.
No, it is a completely different roll number. I'm
You
suggesting
assess
it's
separate.
very relevant, but we'll debate that in due course. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That's my questions.
Any Ed, questions?
No questions.
No questions. I have no questions, so proceed with your
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So the only issue, I'll cut to the heart of it here on page 6, we don't take any issue with the department's income valuation, but recall, is sort of, I'm sure the board members have seen this before, but the income valuation presumes that you have sufficient land to serve the property that you're valuing, because if you don't, that's going to severely impact your ability to obtain tenants and generate net rent. In this case, there isn't sufficient land. The land to building ratio, I believe, is 2.3 or 2.68. Certainly anything less than 3 is very problematic if you're trying to lease or sell a property. And in fact, what has happened, as I mentioned, is that the parking lot right across the street at 205 Bond Street has historically been used by this bank, by this property to serve the main property. And the income stream that we're suggesting, and we're not disagreeing with, though, is predicated on that land being available. So our simple request on page 6 is to deduct the value of that 205 Bond Street parking lot, which results in a request this morning. I think that should be 944,000, not 945. So our request is 944,000. What we've attached, pages 7 and 8, that's the value of the subject, on page 8, the map, assessment map showing the location of the subject. And at pages 9 and 10, that's the assessment page confirming the value of 144,000 and the map for that lot that is servicing the subject property. That, pardon me, the sort of aerial photo is also of the board, and Ms. Shava, turn to page 3. Page 3, the bottom aerial photograph shows the actual sort of Google Earth view with the bank building just to the north and the parking lot immediately below the building itself across the back lane there serving the subject. So that's the basis of our request this afternoon. Thank you.
Questions of your opponent?
Yes. What, in your opinion, sufficient land area ratio is
For a retail type use,
for banks?
if you have bank, which I'm considering, this is a retail location. So for a retail type use like this is between 3.5 to 1 and 4 to 1. Somewhere in that range.
And do you aware that this adjusted parking lot is under appeal 2020, file number
The parking lot
19?
is? No, actually, that is good to know. Thank you
It's
for pointing
under
that out.
appeal,
I
so
will.
it's a separate property, it's not relevant to our
Oh, no,
subject
it
property.
is a separate property, so and thank you for pointing that out, Ms. Shable. I will be having a discussion with, and this is an important point, I'm requesting the value of 144,000 be deducted. That is predicated on the notion that that assessed value doesn't change, because otherwise there's a potential for duplication. So, thank you for pointing that out. I will be advising my colleague that, subject to this board's decision on the parking lot, if the deduction's made, then it would only be appropriate to withdraw that appeal. So thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions? Ed, any questions?
No questions. I have one, Mr. Reimer. If you turn to page 3 in your submission,
Yes.
there's parking to the immediate east of the building.
There is indeed insufficient parking, but yes,
So
parking.
what's that portion in front of, you can see where there's a division of the parking lot, is that just vacant land?
Mr. McIntyre, may we approach?
Just next to the building here?
The kind of gray or brown, or whatever you want to call it
It's look
there.
like grass.
Is this
Oh,
is
yeah,
the parcel?
that's exactly, so that is Greenfield. There,
It's
I
sufficient.
gather they couldn't get, obviously they couldn't get a curb cut off region to access that.
But they're not parking off region anyway, they're on Vaughan.
Exactly, so, I mean, I guess if they wanted to develop that and go angled, it'd be very, very tight, you'd have to have sort of angled lot, I'm not sure how many stalls you'd gain then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I
Sure.
understand.
20 at least if you do angle. Please, sorry.
No further questions.
Okay, are you aware of any zoning requirements for parking?
Zoning requirements, I am aware of the requirements being in place. I guess, I don't know what the minimum zoning requirements would be. Certainly the minimum zoning, I would think would be consistent with a ratio closer to 3.5, but as a practical reality, with the real estate market, when you're talking about a retail use, it's one thing if it's assumed to be sort of an office use where you don't have a lot of foot traffic, like public traffic coming through, but if it's a retail type use, a 3.5 ratio is anything less than that, and you start to impinge on the value of the property and on the value of the, what the tenant would be willing to pay for that space. But I do not know what the minimum requirement under zoning would be, no.
Okay, if this were to be sold, then would the most likely use be office or retail?
It could be either one, but it would be sold, this is very important. They would be selling this and bond as a package. They're not gonna be splitting out. If they split out, in my respectful submission, if they split out that one parking lot, now effectively they're slitting their own throat with the value of the main holding, because there's just if it's a particular office user that doesn't need the parking and they've got no foot traffic, okay, but now you're really limiting your market. And I would think, especially with this frontage on Regent, it would lend itself more to the retail type use than, or even if you've got sort of a law firm or something like, physiotherapy, they're gonna have a lot of foot traffic. So for most uses on Regent, where you're gonna maximize value, you need to have that parking.
Okay, those are my questions. So thank you. And we've got time for this one more property, 540 St. Anne's Road. Item 7 on the agenda, so you can proceed.
File number 19-4005, 540 St. Anne Road, location, roll number 0800447650. It's Integra Credit Union. We are valuing the property as it stands of January 1st, 2020, based on the economic condition April 1st, 2018. This appeal is with respect to the amount of the assessed value only. Integra Credit Union Limited is located on southeast portion of the city of Winnipeg. Please open page 10 and 11. You can see location map, air photos of the property, irregular shape of lots is 51,178 square foot. Main floor area 16,000. Improvements built in 2014 with the main floor area of 16,252 square feet, and basement area of 4,220 square feet. Our leasable area 28,839 square feet. We did receive information for 2017 in April 23rd, 2019. Information posted on page 1213. It's partially owner occupied with gross lease in. A subject property was sold in 2012 for $2,950,000. Subject property has gross lease to premises for around 3,000 square feet for $37.62, and around 5,000 square feet premise for $34 square feet. My bond rent comparables presented on page 3. First, it's subject property. Our bank area 18,061 square feet. We did apply $20.48. I did presented 6 comparables with build between 1982 and 2017, with area between 3,000 to roughly 7,000 square feet, with our media net per square foot $31.50, or my comparables map presented below on same page. On page 4, I did search for comparables, office rent comparables. Subject property has 10,778 square feet. We did apply $13.84. My 5 comparables build effective years improvements from 1987 to 2016. Lease area between 1.2 thousand and 4,000 square feet, with median net rent per square foot $25 per square foot. This map of my comparables present and map below. On page 5, first we will be estimate the potential market rent of office space. We have three premises. Last premise it's stand for basement. Our leasable area of office space 10,778 square feet. We did apply for overall $13.84. Our potential rent $149,000. We did apply vacancy rate 5.5%. Our effective gross income came across $141,000. We allowed for not recoverable expenses, general 2 expenses allowances for advertising, promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, etc. And also shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $7 per square foot. Our capitalization rate 6.55%. It's inside our range presented on page 8 for suburban area between 6.2 and 7.3. It's 28 percentiles. Our estimate value for office space $2,046,000. On page 6, I did present estimation of bank space, total area of 18,061 square feet. We did apply average $20.48. Our potential rent $317,000. We did apply a 2% vacancy lost. We, Assess Taxation Department also allowed for not recoverable expenses. It's 2% expense allowance, general, that include advertising, promotion, professional fees, structural repairs, and also shortfall allowance per square foot to account for not recoverable expenses during time of vacancy of $8 per square foot. Our net operation income, our overall capitalization rate 6.55%. If you divide our net operation income of 352,343 by 6.55%, our value, estimate value for banking space, 5,379,000. On our page 7, we have summary of both streams. Our estimate value of 7,425,000. Let's come back to my comparables. On page 16, my comparables on Portridge lease signed in 2017 for $31, lease signed in 2015 for $23. On Region Avenue lease signed in 2017 for $25. On Pembina lease signed in 2017 for $32 per square foot. On page 19, Center Street lease signed in 2016 for $45 per square foot. You can see it's a regular shape of the building, bank. On Kivatian on page 20, lease signed in 2016 for $24. Oh, it's one page. Retail space. Space on 21 retail space signed for $19 per square foot. On page 22 on Gateway lease signed for $25 per square foot. And on Kivatian Boulevard, property adjusted to subject property lease signed for $25 per square foot. Based on the evidence in this report, it is assessor opinion that the market value of subject property as of April 1st, 2018 is $7,425,000, and that the 2020 assessed value should be confirmed.
Any questions, Mr. Reimer?
Just a couple. Ms. Shable, could I ask you to turn to page 7, and board members, please? Actually, truly just one question. The cap rate of 6.55% was applied to both income streams, and that's a model-driven cap rate, correct?
It's correct.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions.
Okay, any questions, Brent?
I have no questions.
Yeah. I have none, so you can proceed.
Could I ask the board and Ms. Shable to skip to page 14, please? So as you can see there, the rent, potential rent, we have no issue with that, no issue with the vacancy allowance. Again, 5% we're adding in, and the cap rate. So the cap rate that was applied with respect to the 2018 assessment, and I'll show you in a second, but there's actually two different cap rates. It blends out though to 7.14%, the blended cap rate for the entire income stream applied to that valuation. That is what we're suggesting in our valuation for the 2020 assessment on page 14. No compression we're suggesting, and certainly the 7.15% is consistent as well with the office sales that we presented this afternoon. So our request, as you can see, there's based on the application of 5% in additional allowance, 7.15% cap to come in at $6,473,000. I'll just draw the board's attention to please page 21. And this is the 2018 assessment, and as you can see there, the bank income stream at that time was capped at 7.5%. The OFS income stream is at 6.25. If you take the total NOI of 447,716 and you apply a 7.15% to that income stream, that's how you'll get it, the blended rate of the total assessment is 6,273,000 using that blended rate. So it's that 7.15% that we are requesting this afternoon. Thank you.
Questions of the appellant?
No question.
Okay, Ed, questions?
No questions.
Okay?
No questions.
Okay, we come to the last item, which I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna have to recuse myself for the last item.
Well, I'm going to say what we will not attempt that tonight because the assessor had the time commitment at 4:30 as well. Is the room available? Do we have a room available for Friday morning?
I would have to talk to Visa. I could grab her quickly.
Yeah, if you could, just see if we can. Okay, we'll conclude for today, but we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock on Friday morning to hear the last property on this agenda, and then we will proceed from there to make our deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
What are we gonna do with this stuff?
I will take it.